Chapter 1779. Meg went out to do 3 things. He went to the factory in the north of the city. The weaving factory was operating normally, and the brewery was in the final stages of construction. Hannah was at the construction site every day to ensure that the brewery would be built according to her ideas. She couldn't wait to see the image of rum gushing out of the new brewing machine. After that, Meg went to the Blue Suede to have afternoon tea with Miss Gloria and talk about life and dreams. Seeing that it was about time, Meg rode his bicycle to fetch Amy home for dinner. Mr. Mag always gives off a laid-back and comfortable vibe. Gloria stood in front of the window on the 2nd floor and watched the figure riding away leisurely with a faint smile and a blush on her face. "Young mistress, Chaos City's sales bulletin is back. Do you want to read it now or at night?" Mar's voice sounded from behind. "Give it to me." Gloria's expression immediately became cold again. She turned to take the bulletin that had just been delivered and entered her career woman time. She didn't have much time left. During this period, her grandmother had been bringing her aunt and her 2 elder sisters to beg and cry in front of her grandfather every day. She had to make Cyril lose the chance to become the successor completely before her grandfather changed his mind. "Father, did you know that Daphne's grandpa brought us to catch rabbits today? We caught a lot of rabbits. The rabbits are so cute." Amy sat at the back of the bicycle with a small cage in her hand. There was a grayish-white rabbit in it. "So, are you going to keep this rabbit?" Meg asked with a smile. Meow, ugly duckling, who had intermittent motion sickness, poked its head out of the basket and looked at Amy concernedly. Daphne's grandpa said that this rabbit is already an adult. "It's no longer a little rabbit," Amy said. So, we don't have to keep it anymore." Amy thought about it seriously for a while and said, "You can roast it, boil it, or fry it. It'll definitely be delicious." Ugly Duckling scratched its head with its paw and pondered for a moment before its eyes suddenly widened in realization. "Wow, you." Ugly Duckling lay back down in the basket of the cart in a daze. "That's a good idea." Meg nodded his head smilingly. Roast rabbit, diving rabbit, diced pepper rabbit, spicy rabbit head. Pesque, thinking that such a cute bunny was about to be eaten, she couldn't help but tear up. Meg brought Amy back to the restaurant. They smoothly passed the security guards and entered the restaurant. The representatives of the various clans, who had been arguing intensely, saw Meg and his daughter walk in. Suddenly, he felt a little hungry. What a magical power! This chef actually controlled the rhythm of this meeting. Little Amy. Crassus looked at Amy and immediately stood up with a smile. Julian also had a smile on his face, but he still maintained the dignity of a great magic caster and wasn't in a hurry to get up. Master Crassus, Master Julian. When Amy saw her 2 masters, she also skipped over happily and hugged their thighs respectively. Then, she smiled at the representatives of the various clans and said, "Let me introduce them to everyone. These 2 are my masters." The corners of the representatives' mouths twitched. The little girl was young, but she really knew how to hug thighs. Now, the entire Norland continent knew that this little girl couldn't be offended. Meg went back to the kitchen consciously and began to prepare dinner for the various clans' representatives. Meanwhile, the various clans' representatives, who were still discussing how to solve the problem of the devils, actually flipped through the menu and started to think about what to eat for dinner. "Mr. Mac is going to harm the country and the people." Michael laughed in his heart. He glanced at the menu and seriously considered whether he should eat grilled fish or braised chicken and rice for dinner. The various clans' congress ended at 9 p.m. "This restaurant is great. I've eaten so much that I've forgotten what I'm here for today. Are we still having the meeting here tomorrow?" The various clans' representatives rubbed their bloated stomachs and walked out of the restaurant longingly. Such a day is so fulfilling. Vanessa followed Josh into the horse-drawn carriage and lamented. She had hot pot for dinner again and was really satisfied. "Vanessa, you will return to Rodu with President Richard tomorrow morning," Josh said to Vanessa seriously. "Huh?" Vanessa was slightly taken aback and immediately shook her head. "No, I finally returned to Chaos City. How can I go on a one-day trip?" "This is not a joke. That devil is not far from Chaos City, and we still can't be sure if those spell formation masters from the Moon Nation have the ability to reseal it. Chaos City is the most dangerous place now, so you have to return to Rodu. I will get Uncle Abraham to go back with you tomorrow, Josh said seriously, and his voice also became more serious. This was the first time Vanessa had seen Josh speak to her like this. She immediately became weaker and hesitantly said, "But won't the various clans send out their powerhouses? Won't they be able to kill that devil? Its power is beyond your imagination." Josh shook his head. His face suddenly paled, and he instinctively reached out to press on the carriage. "What's wrong, big brother Josh?" Vanessa looked at Josh nervously. "I'm fine. It's just a small injury." Josh shook his head. He looked at Vanessa and said, "But you have to go back tomorrow. Otherwise, if anything happens to you, I won't be able to answer to Father." Vanessa hesitated for a moment, but still nodded and softly said, "All right, then I will go home." "Good girl." Josh patted her head with a smile. "When this is over, I will bring you to Amy's to eat to your heart's content." Vanessa's eyes lit up. She looked into Josh's eyes and said, "You can't lie to me. I'm a dog if I lie to you." Josh nodded with a smile and looked at Vanessa with a doting gaze. The carriage stopped outside the city lord's manor, and Josh calmly alighted before returning to his room. As soon as he entered the room, the anti-prying spell formation that he had brought with him was activated. Josh couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of black blood. His already pale face turned even paler. He staggered forward a couple of steps and sat down on the table with great difficulty. Then, he panted heavily. He took out a small bottle from his bosom, pulled out the stopper, and poured out a handful of small blue pills. Then, he put the pills into his mouth with trembling hands. He grabbed the water bottle on the table and directly poured a few mouthfuls of water into his mouth before he could barely swallow the pills. After doing all that, Josh slumped onto the table, panting heavily. It took him a long time to catch his breath. Josh slumped on the table for a long time. The pills gradually took effect, and a hint of color finally returned to his face. He slowly stood up and pulled out a black box from under his bed. He opened the lid and looked at the black sculpture inside. "You almost killed me. No pop-up window." Chapter 1780. Mother, does this feel good? Amy stood on the bed and gave Irina, who was sitting beside the bed, a pat on her back. Ugly Duckling lay by her feet and massaged her calves attentively as well. It feels good." Irina closed her eyes, but she couldn't hide the smile on her face. "Tisk, tisk." Meg stood at the side, feeling a little jealous. His daughter hadn't massaged his back that many times. "I walked a little too much today, and my legs are a little sore." Irina lifted her slender leg and placed it gently on the stool beside the bed as she looked up at Meg. Amy also immediately looked at Meg and gave him a look. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. He was a 7-foot-tall man. How could he? "Then I'll give you a massage." Meg sat down on the stool naturally and placed Irina's foot on his lap. Her calves were slender and fair, but they weren't skinny. They had beautiful curves, and her ankles were small and delicate. Her round toes were like plump pearls. When Meg touched them, the backs of her feet trembled a little nervously. Although Meg wasn't a foot fetish, he was still in awe of this pair of feet that were as exquisite as a work of art. Of course, when he held this foot in his hand, the pride that belonged to a man rushed to his head. "Yes, let me introduce you. This is my wife's foot. Are you going to massage it or not?" Irina looked at Meg, who was in a daze as he held her foot, and a blush appeared on her face as she asked shyly, "I'm trying to see where to start." "Start." Meg coughed awkwardly. He placed his hand on Irina's foot and began to give her a proper massage. Her skin was very smooth and delicate, and her muscles were very elastic. She was a high-quality ingredient. Meg tried his best to put away his distracting thoughts as he recalled the pressing techniques and acupoints of those cute girls when he was cultivating his body and mind. Then, he began to massage Irina's calves and feet. Looking at Irina sitting there, as well as Amy, who was behind her, massaging her back and occasionally saying a few witty words, Meg felt a warm feeling in his heart. This kind of happiness did not come easily, and he hoped that it would last forever. Irina's face was slightly red. However, other than the initial nervousness, as Meg became more proficient in massaging, the comfortable feeling from the soles of her feet and calves gradually made her relax. What surprised her was Meg's massage technique. He was obviously a man who only knew how to use a big sword and a kitchen knife. When did he learn this massage technique? It made her feel more comfortable than soaking in a hot spring. In Rodu, the imperial palace was still brightly lit. The letter that had been sent back from Chaos City had shaken Rodu to its core. His Majesty had gathered all the court officials for a meeting, and it had not ended even after nightfall. There were still over a dozen court officials sitting in the meeting hall. Your Majesty, according to your request, we have already prepared 18 types of spell formation materials. Should we send them to Chaos City tonight? An official said respectfully as he strode into the meeting hall. Andre, who was sitting on the throne, calmly said, "There's no hurry. We will set off tomorrow morning." Yes. That official accepted the order and turned to leave quickly. Your Majesty, this incident with the devils happened too suddenly, and the sudden appearance of the Moon Nation and Lantist made a huge change. I wonder how we should express our stance during the peace conference. An official asked worriedly. All the other officials also looked worried. Originally, with the Roth Empire's national power, everyone thought that they should propose to redivide the territories during the peace conference. The best situation would be to subdue the enemy without a fight, and make the various races give up a part of their territory to the Roth Empire voluntarily. However, the appearance of the devils made the peace conference seem less important. Meanwhile, the appearance of Lantist and the Moon Nation, which had many 10th-tier powerhouses, became a huge change in the division of the territories. Let's put the peace conference aside for now. Let's settle that fellow that suddenly appeared first. Andre stood up. Let them prepare. If the seal's reconstruction fails, we will send 20 10th tier great magic casters and 20 10th tier knights to reinforce Chaos City. 40 10th tier powerhouses. All the officials in the hall were shocked. This was almost 90% of Chaos City's highest combat power, and His Majesty actually sent all of them out. It's time to let them know how powerful the Roth Empire is. Andre smiled and left under the escort of a group of guards. Your Majesty is wise. All the officials were deep in thought. Andre walked out of the hall and suddenly said to a close official beside him, "Get all the military regions to prepare for level 1 battle." Yes, that close official answered softly before leaving quickly. Demon, you've come at the right time. I'd like to see how powerful you are. Andre sneered. Devil. In the starry cave, Helena looked at the flickering stars in the crystal ball with a grave expression. A dark cloud was spreading among the stars like a black hole, as if it was going to swallow all the stars. High Priestess, Princess Sally is too rash. Not only did she not align herself with the Roth Empire, she even made such a promise to the elves. Do we need to negotiate with Chaos City about sending powerhouses? An elf elder said. Fool, do you think the Roth Empire is really kind to us? Helena glanced at that elf coldly and sarcastically said, if the Roth Empire really conquers the Norland continent, Andre, this old fool, would never let us elves survive alone. But that elf still wanted to say something. The elves are no longer the elves of the past. We can't even guarantee that we can defeat the goblins now. What do we have to negotiate with the Roth Empire? That fragile and pitiful relationship? Helena sneered. Sally made the right choice at the right time. This time, we have to stand against the Roth Empire in order to have a chance of surviving this storm. Helena retracted her gaze and looked up at the starry sky with a grave expression. A huge crisis has already loomed over the wind forest. The news of the terrifying devil's existence spread quickly and widely through the letters sent by the various representatives to their clans. That night, the group of people who stood on the ruling class of the Norland continent couldn't sleep. Countless resources were taken out from the dusty treasure vaults and placed on the flying steeds to reinforce Chaos City. The best spell formation masters of each race were all mobilized and would be sent along with the spell formation materials. This was a war that concerned the survival of all the races on the Norland continent. This time, everyone shared a common destiny. Chapter 1781. Meg, on the other hand, had a good night's sleep, wife, children, and a warm bed. Such a simple and beautiful vision was realized by Meg just like that. Although he was sleeping on the floor, it didn't affect the deep sense of satisfaction in his heart when he looked at the two lovely people sleeping peacefully on the bed. After getting out of bed quietly and washing up, Meg went downstairs to write a notice and paste it on the door. Researching a new dish. Business will be suspended for 3 days from today onwards. The arrival of the people from the Moon Nation was a stabilizing factor in the originally tense situation. However, this didn't mean that the matter of resealing the devil was in the bag. They didn't have much time left. If there was any mistake, they would have to face a terrifying devil. Although the various races' reinforcements were already on the way, if the first batch of powerhouses couldn't resist that devil, Chaos City, which was only 15 kilometers away from the Thunderstorm Mountains, would be the first to bear the brunt. If they were to tell the residents of Chaos City the truth now, it would definitely cause widespread panic. Where could they run to? The city of Chaos was in the center of the entire continent, which meant that the devil was also in the center of the continent. He could choose to kill in any direction. In Chaos City, most of the residents were just ordinary people after all. They didn't have mounts that could travel 500 kilometers in a day, and they didn't have passes that allowed them to enter the various races' territories easily. This was the reason why the City Lord's castle had sealed off the news. If even the most powerful powerhouses on the Norland continent couldn't stop the devil, then it would be meaningless to abandon the city and flee. Mag felt that there was nothing wrong with what Chaos City had done. He was sure that even if Chaos City really faced the devil, the people from the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple would die outside the city before the residents. And he also needed more time to participate in this war, so he couldn't split his attention to continue cooking and running the restaurant. Meg had already informed Mia and the rest about the suspension of business last night. They all understood how tense the current situation was. Irina drank her soy milk as she looked up at Meg, who came out with a plate of steak, and asked, "Just the 3 of us for breakfast?" "Yes, I asked Gina to go home and play for a few days during the holidays." Meg nodded and cut the steak for Amy with a knife and fork. Closing the restaurant for 3 days is not a small loss. Irina looked at Meg with a smile. She knew how much Meg cared about the business of the restaurant. "It doesn't matter. Whatever we lose, we can get it back from that guy sooner or later." Meg was quite calm. As long as the people of the Moon Nation could rebuild the seal, the system could build an octopus tentacle processing plant. When that time came, he would start to promote the octopus tentacles vigorously. He had to earn back the losses of the past 3 days. Irina smiled and didn't say anything. Of course, a man who could make money was good. "Father, all of you are going to save the world. So what should Amy do?" Amy chewed on her steak and looked at Meg with a troubled expression. "Amy just needs to be cute," Meg said with a smile. "Oh." Amy nodded as if she didn't fully understand. Then, "Amy, where do you want to go to play today?" Amy thought for a while and said, "I want to go to Big Sister Mia's ice cream shop to play today. All the big sisters are there today, so I'll go there and play for the day." "Okay, I'll send you there later." Meg nodded. He was relieved to let Amy and Mia stay there. "Do you want them to leave first?" Irina suddenly asked. Meg naturally knew what she meant. After a moment of silence, he looked into her eyes and said, "I don't think it's necessary now. If the worst happens, I'll get Aziz to bring them away," Meg continued. Irina nodded slightly and didn't ask further. After breakfast, Meg sent Amy to the ice cream shop. When the bicycle turned into the alley, he had already changed his equipment. Meg went to the Thunderstorm Mountains and went underground. However, he didn't enter the cave and only chatted with Novan outside. The good news was that Jonas and the rest showed great professionalism. They managed to decipher almost all the runes in one night, and they were now in the inspection stage. They would be able to finish the work by noon. However, the troublesome thing was that this seal spell formation was more complicated than they had originally estimated. To completely replicate it in 2 days, both the time and materials were not optimistic. "Good luck." Meg turned and left. He didn't know anything about spell formations, and he didn't have a single material that could be used, so he didn't want to get involved in these matters. However, from Novan's words, he could roughly understand some of the meaning. Even if they had sufficient materials, It would be very difficult for them to rebuild a new seal spell formation before the seal lost its effect. This meant that they had to buy more time for the spell formation masters to stop that devil from leaving the seal's range. He, who was at the 9th tier, was almost killed by that octopus monster back then. However, he had already obtained the strength point now, so he planned to find a place to get electrocuted properly to restore his strength to its peak state. After finding a place with good feng shui for himself, Meg, who was preparing to welcome the lightning tribulation, suddenly asked, "Oh, right. System, can this lightning tribulation cause strong damage to that octopus monster?" According to experiments, when the intensity of the lightning reaches a certain level, it will cause a paralyzing effect on the living thing. The exact degree depends on the intensity of the lightning. The lightning tribulation is born from heaven and earth and is a part of the rules of this world. After the host loses the strength point, there will be a strong effect of attracting lightning, thus triggering the lightning tribulation. At this time, everything within a 10-meter radius of the host's body will be treated as one with the host. The intensity of the lightning tribulation will be determined according to the strength of the target. It will be stronger if the target is stronger. The system's voice sounded. Wonderful. Meg's eyes lit up, and he immediately gave up on the idea of striking himself. Even if he recovered to the 10th tier, he would probably only be able to chop off a few of the octopus monster's tentacles with his sword. It wouldn't change anything. However, if he were to go through the tribulation with the octopus monster, just imagining that scene was exciting enough. Bro, let's go through the tribulation together if there's a chance. Sigh. This is such a sad day. At the entrance of Amy's, Vanessa and Abraham sighed at the same time as they looked at the notice hanging on the door. All right. Since it's not open, we should get going, Abraham said as he retracted his gaze. Luckily, I had 2 hot pot meals yesterday. I don't have any regrets now, Vanessa consoled herself as she followed Abraham into the horse-drawn carriage. I don't think there's a need for me to go back to Rodu at all. Chaos City is still in order. Nobody thinks anything of it, Abraham said to Josh, who was sitting opposite him. Vanessa stole a glance at Josh and didn't say anything. Uncle Abraham, this is Royal Father's decree. You've been out for some time, so it's time for you to go back and take a look. Josh took out a letter from his pocket and passed it to Abraham. Chapter 1782. The closure of Amy's brought inconvenience to many people, including the representatives of the various races. I thought this was the City Lord's Castle's canteen, but it doesn't seem to be the case now, Dracula mumbled with a frown as he stood at the entrance of the canteen. Heh, the City Lord's Castle can't afford it. Camilla pursed her lips. However, this was really her canteen. Now that it was closed, she still had to think about where to eat today. Then let's go. Our people and materials should be on the way. We still have to keep an eye on things. Dracula turned and boarded the horse-drawn carriage. You go by yourself. I'll go take a look. Anyway, it's not my turn to fight monsters. Camilla waved her hand and turned to leave. This lass. Dracula looked at Camilla helplessly. If he had known that this meeting would be so troublesome, he wouldn't have rushed to come. The canteen wasn't open for business, but the Yabamiya ice cream shop was open as usual. Although it was still morning, many children who were on holiday couldn't resist the temptation of the ice fairies. They dragged their parents to the ice cream shop early in the morning to try the ice cream. Camilla pushed the door open and entered. She nodded slightly to greet Mia and the rest who were busy. Then, she sat down in the corner by the window. This place was the furthest from the children's play area. It was secluded and quiet. As soon as Camilla sat down, Amy sat down opposite her with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She asked with a smile, Big Sister Camilla, where's your Blackie? Meanwhile, Ugly Duckling's ears perked up. Even though it still wore a lazy expression, it was clearly quite wary of that black cat. I didn't bring it out. Camilla shook her head with a smile. It's not convenient to bring it out with such an ugly face. Amy nodded in agreement. She looked down at Ugly Duckling and lamented, Ugly Duckling. Now do you know how much courage and determination it took for me to bring you out? Meow, Ugly Duckling meowed pitifully. It rubbed its furry head against Amy's hand, trying to get back some love for itself. The other children were all staring at Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms. That furry ball looked so adorable. Mia took an ice cream and handed it to Camilla with a smile. She whispered, "Don't we have a meeting today?" "Yeah, anyway, I'm just a bystander." Camilla nodded and raised her hand to set up a small soundproof barrier. After that, she looked at Yabamiya and said, "The restaurant is closed for the next 2 days. Do you want to leave Chaos City to lie low for a while?" "Lie low?" Mia looked at Camilla in confusion. Camilla looked into Mia's eyes and said, "The situation this time is a little complicated. I'm not sure if they can resist that guy. If they can't, Chaos City will become very dangerous. Hence, I want to bring you all away from here for a few days. Anyway, the results will be out in 2 days." This, Yabamiya hesitated. Although she didn't know what those adults were talking about yesterday, she could tell the severity of the situation from their expressions. "Mia, do you trust me?" Camilla asked. "Of course." Yabamiya nodded without hesitation. After thinking for a while, she said, "I want to discuss with everyone. After all, this isn't something that I can decide on my own." "All right." Camilla nodded and began to eat her ice cream. "Here, if you haven't had breakfast, have some biscuits. It's great to eat them together." Amy pulled out a small metal box from somewhere. It was filled with bear biscuits, and she placed it in front of Camilla. "These are snacks that Father gave me." Camilla looked at the bear biscuits in the metal box with furrowed brows. As a vampire, these biscuits are crispy, fragrant, and sweet. They're 10,000 times better than pancakes. Amy picked up a biscuit and bit off the bear's head with a crunch. She chewed on the biscuit like a little squirrel stealing food. She enjoyed it very much. Camilla, who hadn't had breakfast yet, immediately felt her stomach growl restlessly. She couldn't help but gulp. "Come on, try one. It's really good." Amy picked up a biscuit and handed it to Camilla. In the face of Amy's warm invitation, Camilla didn't want to leave a rigid impression on the child. She reached out and took the biscuit. At the same time, she emphasized, "I'll only eat one." Crunch. Camilla's eyes lit up when she bit into the biscuit. The biscuit was crispy, fragrant, and delicious. It was easy to swallow with just a little chewing. There wasn't any hard to chew. After eating one biscuit, she couldn't help but take another one. One bear biscuit in one bite, paired with a mouthful of ice cream. It was really delicious. After the peak hours, Mia hung a temporarily closed sign outside the door. Everyone gathered together after closing the door. Elizabeth, Gina, Shirley, Anna, Phyrus, Jane, and Angela were all at Yabamiya's ice cream shop today. Raina had gone to the hot pot restaurant early in the morning. Hannah was still guarding the winery, and Barbara wasn't back yet. Most of the restaurant's customers were here. "Amy, where's your father?" Camilla asked Amy. The restaurant wasn't open today, and Amy was here. "Where was Meg?" "He went out early in the morning. Maybe he went to the factory." Amy shook her head. She really didn't know where her father went. "Mia said you asked us to leave Chaos City for 2 days. Did something happen?" Elizabeth asked Camilla. She didn't go to the restaurant yesterday. The others were also looking at Camilla. Camilla had attended the meeting yesterday as the representative of the vampires, so she might know something. After confirming that the soundproof spell formation was set up, Camilla looked at everyone with a serious expression and said, "An existence that's not easy to deal with has appeared near Chaos City. All the races are sending their resources and powerhouses over now, but even so, we don't have 100% confidence that we can reseal or kill it. Once the situation goes out of control, Chaos City might be attacked. Hence, I want to bring all of you out of Chaos City in advance to lie low for a while. We'll see how the situation goes in 2 days. If the situation is under control, it won't be too late for all of you to come back. If the worst happens, you don't have to come back." Everyone's expression changed upon hearing that. A terrifying existence that the entire continent couldn't deal with? What kind of terrifying and powerful power did it have? Why didn't Chaos City and all the races send out any warnings? Elizabeth asked. Panic might cause more serious consequences. The Norland continent needs to focus on dealing with that fellow now. Camilla shook her head slightly. Besides, if even the most powerful beings on the continent can't stop that fellow, there's not much point in running away. Then why are we still running? Amy asked as she raised Ugly Duckling's little paw. Nobody wants to be the first to die, right? Camilla said calmly. Chapter 1783. After a short discussion, Amy's first leaderless meeting had a vote. 50-50. Yabamiya showed the 10 votes in her hand. Half of them were to leave, and half were to stay. What a headache. Camilla frowned. She was a little surprised by the voting result. Since there's no point in escaping, why don't we stay and fight? Shirley said calmly. Do you think I would want to bring all of you away if I could defeat it? Camilla looked at her with a deeper frown. I agree to leave for 2 days. Whether we stay or not doesn't make much of a difference to Chaos City. If it's an existence that even a 10th-tier powerhouse can't defeat, we might become a burden by staying here, not to mention leaving our names for revenge, Elizabeth said. That chief of the August tribe, Oster, you guys still have a video department, right? Camilla asked. Everyone nodded. They had a deep impression of that fellow when they helped Connie return to the Falk tribe to take revenge. The arm that he lost yesterday was because of that terrifying existence. It ate his hand and almost killed the tyrant King Dragon Clan's patriarch. Camilla continued to say, Franklin is one of the most powerful members of the Dragon Clan. Elizabeth pursed her lips. She had already realized how terrifying that terrifying existence that Camilla was talking about was. Mia, go pack your things and prepare to leave Chaos City, Elizabeth said to Yabamiya. All right. Mia nodded. She held Jane's and Angela's hands and said, You two go and pack your things too. Let's leave together. Take it as a vacation. After Elizabeth made her stand, everyone hesitated and prepared to leave too. But I have to wait for Father to make a decision, Amy said softly. You guys pack your things first. I'll go look for him. Camilla got up and disappeared from the restaurant in a puff of black smoke. Are we really not leaving with everyone? Anna looked up at Shirley and asked. Shirley saw the worry in Anna's pure eyes. She hesitated for a while before nodding. Let's go too. We'll go somewhere safe. Okay. A smile finally appeared on Anna's face as she held Shirley's hand tightly. Gina looked at everyone and said, I might not be able to leave with everyone. I'm here to bid farewell to everyone this morning. I have to make a trip back to Lantis. Go on. It's good to be home. Yabamiya smiled and said, Then I'll go look for Raina and Hannah. They don't know about this yet. When Camilla found Meg, he was pushing his bicycle and chatting with teacher Luna, whom he had met by chance. She didn't know what Meg said, but Luna let out a pleasant laugh from time to time. Her eyes were filled with gentleness and happiness. This fellow is indeed not a pure man. He won't even let off the child's teacher. Camilla muttered to herself as she squatted on the wall and watched the two of them from afar. Seems like Mr. Meg has a very deep understanding of children's education. I'll have to seek your advice next time. Luna looked at Meg with a smile. It's just some interesting conversations that I've heard in the past. It's already rare to be able to make teacher Luna smile. How could it be considered an opinion, let alone advice? Meg quickly waved his hands. After he made up his mind to transcend the tribulation with that octopus monster, he returned to Chaos City. He happened to bump into Luna, who was on her way back from delivering things to the children, so he stopped the car and chatted with her for a while. Of course, his motive was very pure. After all, she was Amy's favorite teacher. Love her dog. Hence, Meg cared a little more for teacher Luna. Are you going back to the school? Meg asked Luna after they finished chatting happily about the study flunkies. Yes. A batch of teaching equipment has arrived today. I need to go and arrange the display and distribution of work. Luna nodded with a smile and said, It was a pleasure chatting with you. I feel much more relaxed now. I have to go back now. See you next time. The restaurant isn't open today, and I've wasted teacher Luna's precious time. Let me send you back to the school. It's on the way anyway. Meg put the child seat down and stepped onto the bicycle. He patted the back of the bicycle with a smile. If you don't mind the cold wind. Thank you for the trouble. Luna looked at Meg, who had a gentle smile on his face. She hesitated for a while, but still jumped onto the back of the bicycle. She held onto her heart that was suddenly beating faster and comforted herself in her heart. Because I really don't have time. Yes, that's it. Sit tight. Meg reminded her as he stepped on the pedals and began to speed up. Luna, who was riding a bicycle for the first time, subconsciously grabbed onto Meg's waist. However, she quickly reacted and quickly let go of her hand. However, because the bicycle was going too fast, she could only hold onto Meg's clothes with a red face. At the same time, she closed her eyes, not daring to look at the rapidly moving ground. I've already recorded it. When you find a wife in the future, let's see how you explain it to her. Camilla, who was squatting on the roof, snorted coldly. She put away the photo stone in her hand and disappeared from the roof. Is the wind too cold? Meg looked at Luna, who was running into the school with a red face, and muttered in confusion. He turned the bicycle around and was about to go back when a head suddenly fell from the tree in front of him. He was so shocked that he raised his hand and punched it. Ugh! Meg looked at Camilla, who crawled out of the bushes with a black eye. He looked a little embarrassed as he went forward to help her up. You actually hit me? Camilla was angry and aggrieved. She felt that her entire eye was burning. What made her even angrier was that she, a dignified ninth-grade vampire, was actually sent flying by a man's punch. Who told you to suddenly hang down from the tree in broad daylight? My body did it on its own. This has nothing to do with me. Meg shrugged. Camilla stomped her feet. She did intend to scare Meg, but she didn't expect that his first reaction would be to raise his hand and punch her. He didn't have the slightest bit of defense, nor did he have the slightest hesitation. He sent her flying just like that. If this were to spread out, her illustrious reputation would be ruined. Ahem, let's pretend this never happened. Camilla coughed dryly. Why are you here? Meg looked at Camilla in confusion. As the representative of the vampires, she should be having a meeting at the city lord's residence. What's wrong? Do you have a guilty conscience? Are you worried that your shady business will be discovered? Camilla looked at Meg with a faint smile. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. He was sure that no one followed him after he left the city. After he entered the city, he restrained his divine sense in order to hide his strength, so he didn't know when Camilla came. Therefore, he said very frankly, I met my daughter's teacher by chance and sent her to school because I was in a hurry. Is this some shady business? You don't have to explain to me. You should save this for your wife in the future. Camilla sneered as she tossed the photo stone in her hand. No pop-up window. Chapter 1784. Mag knew that those who walked by the river often would eventually get their shoes wet, but he didn't expect karma to come so quickly. Meg frowned as he looked at the photo stone in Camilla's hand. Explanation? Women never needed explanations. They only believed what they saw. You can keep it. I don't have a wife anyway, Meg said to Camilla with a smile. You. Camilla glared at him. She didn't expect there to be such a shameless person in this world. There aren't many men like me who are willing to help others. If you want to use this to apply for a good person of this generation, please help me submit it to the city lord's castle, Meg continued to say with a smile. I won't hand it over to the city lord's castle, but I will hand it over to Miss Gloria. Camilla put away the photo stone and a smile appeared on her face again. I want her to see clearly what kind of beast you are. Miss Gloria seems to be on good terms with Teacher Luna. If you want to promote my outstanding character, Meg said nonchalantly. I'll be a fool if I believe you. Camilla rolled her eyes. She didn't believe him at all. I'm going back to the restaurant. Do you want me to give you a ride? Meg asked Camilla as he got on the bicycle. Sure. Camilla was about to get on the bicycle, but she quickly stopped and sneered. Trying to trick me? Forget it if you don't want to ride. Mag kept the photo stone secretly. He stepped hard on the pedals, and the bicycle dashed out. Wait a minute. Camilla stopped Meg, who had just started, and lowered her voice. I'm here to inform you to pack up and leave. Leave? Meg didn't understand. You were also present during the meeting yesterday. Now, Camilla told Meg about the tense situation. So, I'm sending you guys out of Chaos City first. You can consider if you want to come back after this is over. Mia and the rest are already packing. Meg looked at Camilla in surprise. He did not expect her to send them away in such a situation. Although I am very good-looking, now is not the time to stare at me in a daze. Amy is still waiting for you. Go back to the dining room and pack your things first. Camilla flicked her hair. All right, let's go then. Meg nodded and rode around Camilla. After riding a few steps forward, he turned back and said with a smile, Today is indeed pretty. Ah, a man's mouth is a liar. Camilla pouted expressionlessly. She looked at Meg's back as he walked away, and a faint blush appeared on her face. She reached out and touched her face. Do you still need to say it? Meg didn't reject Camilla's offer. Chaos City was indeed on the edge of a knife's edge now. His original plan was to let Ozzy bring Amy and the rest away at the critical moment. However, if that octopus monster really escaped, he couldn't guarantee that Ozzy would be able to come back in time. Since Camilla had already mobilized everyone, and the restaurant was already closed, he would just take it as bringing everyone on a holiday. He would just have to find an excuse to return earlier. Father, are we really leaving? Meg went to the ice cream shop to fetch Amy. On the way back, the little fellow looked at him with concern and asked, What about Mother? Will she leave with us? She will be very busy these 2 days. She can't leave with us. Meg stopped the car in front of the restaurant and carried Amy down. He looked into her eyes with a smile and said, She wants to save the world. Father will stand with her too. Then, Amy wants to be with you guys too. We will save the world together. Amy's beautiful eyes were glowing. When Amy grows up and becomes stronger, she will be able to fight alongside us, Meg said with a smile as he placed his hand gently on Amy's head. Amy looked into Meg's eyes and nodded seriously. The luggage was packed very simply. Meg packed some daily necessities for Amy, a set of pajamas, and 2 sets of clothes to change into. Even so, it only filled a small suitcase. Not long after, Yabamiya and the rest arrived at the restaurant one after another. If we leave now, will my brewery be gone? Hannah, who was in a daze, asked Meg worriedly. Don't worry. It's more likely that we will only stop working for 2 days, Meg consoled her with a smile. Raina said she intends to stay and let Mana Hot Pot restaurant continue its business. Yabamiya said to Meg. Then let's not force her. Meg nodded. Raina grew up in Chaos City, and her mother was still here. It was not strange that she didn't want to leave. Almost everyone is here. Let's set off then. Camilla looked at everyone with a smile and said, I can only send all of you out of the city. From now on, I can only wish all of you and me good luck. Big sister Camilla, aren't you leaving with us? Amy looked at Camilla with concern. Yeah, you know how serious the situation is. Are you still going to stay? Angela looked at her perplexedly. No matter what, I'm still the representative of the vampires. It's embarrassing to run away at the last minute. Camilla smiled nonchalantly. Besides, if I stay, I can still bring that silly girl, Connie, Raina, and her mother with me if the situation goes south. I have wings, so I can fly very fast. Let's go. We will leave the city at a distance and gather at the main road too, 5 kilometers north of the city. Meg did not say much and led the way out with Amy. Anyway, he had to come back. With him and Irina around, they could more or less take care of Camilla and the rest. After 10 odd minutes, everyone gathered at the north of the city again. Where are we going now? Yabamiya asked Meg. Let's go to the Blue Grassland. It's one of the few livable places in the extreme north. Just take it as another vacation. Meg decided on a destination right away. Can we eat lamb again? Amy's eyes lit up with anticipation. The spell formation has been completely analyzed. We need to start setting up a new spell formation immediately. Are the materials in place? Jonas asked Novin with the spell formation blueprint in his hand. He could not hide his fatigue. According to your request, the first batch of materials is all here. The follow-up materials are also on the way. They will arrive before we use them. Novin nodded. He gestured toward the cave entrance, and boxes of materials were moved into the cave immediately. The spell formation masters from the various races are also waiting outside the cave. What level of spell formation masters do you need? How many do you need? I will send them in immediately, Novin continued. Jonas pondered for a moment and said, I need 5 spatial magic casters above the 7th tier, 20 spell formation masters above the 6th tier who are good at drawing complicated runes, and 50 spell formation masters above the 5th tier who are proficient in spell formations. Chapter 1785. The various races of the Norland continent had shown that they were taking this crisis seriously. In just half a day, more than 300 formation masters had been deployed to reinforce Chaos City, and all of them were formation masters above the 5th tier. After they arrived at Chaos City, they were all deployed by Chaos City. Although these formation masters had already been notified before they came and knew the purpose of this trip, however, when they passed through that strange stone door and saw that indescribable thing in the ceiling spell formation, fear and disgust still made their expressions change drastically. There were even 2 low-tier 5th-tier formation masters who fainted on the spot due to fear. Carry them out and choose 2 more to come in. Novin looked at the formation masters who were at a loss for words calmly and solemnly said, "Everyone, today, we are going to fight for the Norland continent and reseal this fellow. Fear is its weapon. If we want to defeat it, the first step is to get rid of our fear. We have nowhere else to retreat to, and we don't have much time left. Therefore, all of you must complete every mission that is given to you. There is no room for error. All of you are the heroes of the Norland continent, but I hope the future generations don't have to use the word heroic to describe us. Can you do that?" "Yes." All the formation masters answered in unison. Their eyes were glowing, and they looked excited. Their fear of that indescribable thing disappeared instantly. This is a powerhouse who knows how to be a leader. Jonas looked at Novin with admiration. "I heard he's the principal of one of the schools here," a formation master at the side said softly. "Mr. Jonas, please assign tasks to them. These are the most outstanding formation masters on the Norland continent." Novin stepped forward. As they had sufficient manpower now, there was no lack of 8th tier and 9th tier formation masters among the selected formation masters. There was even a 10th tier formation master from the Magus Tower. Jonas was also sizing up these formation masters. To be honest, the number and quality of these formation masters shocked him. Including him, there were only 5 formation masters above the 7th tier in the Moon Nation, but there were a total of 30 here. There was 1 10th tier formation master and 4 9th tier formation masters. We've already successfully cracked the formation, but time is limited, so we plan to duplicate an identical ceiling formation. However, we can only set it up outside the original ceiling formation, so we've doubled the original formation. Jonas didn't make any introductory remarks and directly informed the formation masters present of the current situation and began to assign tasks to them. Soon, this group of Norland continent's best spell formation masters got busy under Jonas' command. They cleared the area, unpacked the materials, and engraved the runes. After Jonas arranged the work of the formation masters, he turned to look at Novin and said, "I need to see all the materials sent out of the cave within 3 hours. If there's a lack of certain materials, I suggest that you guys consider how to evacuate the civilians first." "All right." Novin nodded and left the cave. In the City Lord's residence, the staff in charge of receiving the materials were almost running around. The materials that were transported from various clans needed to be checked and sorted before being sent to the Thunderstorm Mountains at the fastest speed. Michael personally oversaw the process and watched over the materials. "City Lord, the amount of blood essence stones has been reduced by half. The goblins said that they've already taken out all the reserves and are currently mining urgently. However, the blood essence stone mine is almost exhausted and has been put aside for many years without mining. I'm afraid we won't be able to reach the target amount in a short period of time." A staff member came forward with sweat all over his forehead. Michael said with a grave expression, "None of the materials for the formation can be missing. Send a message to the various clans immediately and ask them to collect as many blood essence stones as possible. We must have enough." "Yes." The staff member jogged away. "City Lord, Miss Hill from Buffett Banks sent a list. She said that they have a batch of formation materials in their hands. If the City Lord's residence needs them, they can use them at any time." Soon, another staff member ran over and presented a folded list. Michael wasn't surprised that Miss Hill knew about this. With Buffett Bank's influence on the Norland continent, it would be strange if she didn't know about such an important matter. He quickly flipped through the list in his hand. The list was several pages long, and there were many materials listed on it. The quantity was also marked in detail at the back. They even have so many formations and refining materials in reserve. Buffett Bank's wealth is comparable to that of a country. It's not just for show. Michael raised his eyebrows slightly. Soon, his gaze fixed on a certain line on the third page. His eyes lit up, and he said to the staff member who brought the list, "Tell LaBelle that there's no need to send an urgent report. We have the blood essence stones. Hurry up and check if there are any missing materials on this list. Go straight to the Buffett Manor to get them." At the Buffett Manor, Ian sat by the lake, holding a fishing rod in his hand as he leaned leisurely on his reclining chair. "Grandfather, I've already made the necessary arrangements for our clansmen. We'll evacuate from Chaos City today and tomorrow. You and Grandmother have also arranged for your steeds. We can set off now." Shear stood at the side with a nervous expression. "I'm not leaving." Ian looked at the buoy swaying slightly on the surface of the water and calmly said, "I'll stay here, but you don't have to persuade me. If we can't even protect Chaos City, where can we hide on the Norland continent?" Ian smiled. "I've been to many places when I was young. I've been to many places. I've been to many places that I shouldn't have. Now, I don't want to leave. I just want to stay here and fish. I'm not leaving either. I've seen and enjoyed everything in this life. I'm old, and I can't walk anymore. I don't want to leave." A noble-looking old lady walked over slowly and placed her hand gently on Ian's shoulder with a gentle smile. "Grandmother." Miss Hill pursed her lips, but didn't know what to say. "Child, go and do what you need to do. If the worst situation really happens, they still have to rely on you to support them." Ian looked up at Miss Hill and apologetically said, "I'm really sorry to have thrown such a responsibility to you." Miss Hill quickly regained her composure and firmly said, "I believe there won't be any problems. The city lord and the others will definitely stop that thing." Then, she bade farewell and left. "This child, you shouldn't have thrown such a big family to him." The old lady looked at Miss Hill's back view with heartache. If those sons of mine could be a little more capable, Miss Hill wouldn't have to suffer like this. Ian sighed and reached out to pat the hand on his shoulder gently. The two elders looked at each other and smiled. They only had each other in their eyes. Miss Hill walked out of the courtyard and calmly instructed, "Evacuate according to the plan. Remember, don't let anyone see that our family is leaving." Chapter 1786. The journey to the north was very smooth. Yabamiya had already mastered excellent flying skills and had excellent endurance. They arrived at the Blue Grassland in about 3 hours. This time, they didn't go to the nomads' tribe. Instead, they found a flat area beside a river and pitched a few tents as their temporary shelter. Breathing in the warm air of the grassland, looking at the blue sky and the sheep drinking by the river, Meg heaved a long sigh of relief. He hoped that such a beautiful place wouldn't be attacked by the devil. "Father, I'm going to catch the sheep." Amy's voice came from afar. She was like a little tiger pouncing on the sheep. Ugly Duckling hopped behind her and tried to surround the sheep from the side. It looked like a hunting cat. However, before Ugly Duckling could do anything, Amy had already knocked one out with her stick and dragged the 2 blue sheep back. Meow. After Amy dragged the 2 sheep back to the tent, Ugly Duckling pretended to raise its paw and hit the sheep's head twice. Its paw was soft and harmless. Meg went up to handle the 2 sheep with a smile. Soon, the open-air mutton barbecue began. Eating freshly slaughtered mutton skewers on the grassland, the bliss brought by the beautiful scenery and the delicious food lessened a lot of the anxiety of leaving in a hurry. Smiles gradually appeared on everyone's faces. Meg stood beside the barbecue rack and took a sip of beer as he looked at the sky in the south. "Father, you should have some too." Amy held 2 mutton skewers and tiptoed to him. Meg took the mutton skewers with a smile. He could only stay on the grassland for 1 night. He had to rush back to Chaos City tomorrow morning. "Young mistress, Master wants you to go home immediately," Mars said to Gloria, who was flipping through the accounts when he walked into the office. "Now?" Gloria put down the accounts book, a little surprised. "Yes. It seems to be something urgent. Mars nodded. Then I'll leave the rest of the accounts to you. Gloria stood up. Although she was puzzled, she still went out and got into the carriage that Mars had arranged for her. In the Moreton manor, Geoffrey looked at his clansmen gathered in the front yard and said with a serious expression, "Go pack your things and prepare for a long trip." Going on a long trip? Everyone was puzzled. Why did the patriarch suddenly tell them to pack up and leave? And almost all of them? "Father, why do you want us to travel so far away? You're not thinking of expelling us from the family, are you?" Cyril looked nervous, and even his voice was trembling. Herdy and Herney immediately burst into tears. Due to their allowance being cut for the past 2 months, they had fallen from a rich family's status to that of an ordinary family's. If they were to be chased out of the house now, it would be too tragic. When the other clansmen heard this, their complexions changed greatly. For a time, all kinds of pleading and questioning voices were mixed together with cries, making it seem particularly noisy. "Shut up, all of you!" Geoffrey shouted in a deep voice. Like a sudden clap of thunder, everyone immediately fell silent out of fear. "Do whatever I say. If you don't do as I say, I'll expel you from the family today." Geoffrey's gaze swept across everyone present and finally fixed on Cyril. His face was full of disappointment. "If your mother didn't stop me, I would have expelled you, you unfilial son, from the family long ago." Cyril lowered his head and didn't dare to say anything more. The others didn't dare to ask anything either. Geoffrey, who had single-handedly founded the family Moreton, had the power to act arbitrarily in the family like a dictator. "Go. You only have half an hour. Remember, each person can only bring 1 box," Geoffrey continued. Everyone felt as if they had been pardoned and left one after another. "Why are we suddenly going on a long trip? Does Gloria know?" Deborah, Lance, and Mickey walked towards their own yard, looking puzzled and worried. "Then I'll go find my sister. Even if we have to leave, we have to bring her with us," Mickey volunteered. "Master asked me to inform you that he's already sent someone to bring Miss Gloria back. She should be on her way now." An old servant walked over and said respectfully, "Thank you." Lance nodded slightly and led Deborah and Mickey into his own yard. "Pack up. Something must have happened. That's why Father asked everyone to pack up and leave in such a hurry," Lance said to Deborah. "Okay." Deborah didn't ask any more questions. She took out 4 bamboo boxes from the storeroom and began to separate the clothes and important items. Gloria returned to the Moreton manor. As soon as she entered, Geoffrey's old servant led her directly to the meeting room. In the empty meeting room, only Geoffrey was sitting at the head of the table. Secretary Minard was standing at the side with a thick stack of documents in his hands. "Sit opposite," Geoffrey said before Gloria could speak. Gloria glanced at the seat on the other side of the long table. After a slight hesitation, she went forward and sat down. In the quiet meeting room, Geoffrey looked at Gloria. She looked at him with the same calm expression. After a long silence, Geoffrey finally opened his mouth and said in a deep voice, "I've decided to let you be the only successor of family Moreton." Gloria looked surprised. She and Mr. Meg had just started working together in the textile industry. The first batch of cotton yarn hadn't been completed yet, let alone turn the business around. Why would Geoffrey suddenly let her be the only successor? However, she quickly controlled her expression. She wasn't stunned by the sudden surprise. Instead, she looked at Geoffrey in confusion and asked, "Grandfather, why did you choose me to be the only successor now?" Although she had been working hard for this, she didn't want to be chosen for no reason. Perhaps this was Geoffrey's test? Geoffrey looked at Gloria with a deep gaze and said, "Because family Moreton is facing an extremely dangerous disaster now. If the worst happens, I hope the person who can lead family Moreton to the future is you, and only you." Disaster? Gloria was still confused. Could it be that Cyril had caused some trouble again? "You don't have to know too much about this now. Sign this inheritance certificate first, and then go back to pack your things. Prepare to leave Chaos City with your clansmen and go to the villa in Rodu. Chaos City is no longer safe now." Geoffrey shook his head. Gloria shook her head and said, "Although I don't know what happened, Suede's new clothes are going to be launched soon. The integration of the textile industry is also in the final stage. I'm afraid I can't leave Chaos City at this time. Chapter 1787. Gloria's voice was firm and resolute. She didn't know what kind of danger Chaos City was going to face, but her current job was very important to her. In fact, it was even more important to her than becoming the successor. In the beginning, she was competing with Cyril for the right of succession. Perhaps she had wanted to prove herself and fight for her father and family. However, when she saw those young ladies wearing beautiful clothes and revealing confident and beautiful smiles, she seemed to have gradually found the value of her existence. Introducing cotton yarn to the market at a low price would definitely cause a huge stir in the fabric market. Perhaps it would be able to change the current situation where cotton fabric was so expensive that ordinary people couldn't afford it. Perhaps it would be very difficult for her to reach the heights of her grandfather, and perhaps she wouldn't be able to create another family Moraton, but she had found joy and value in doing these things. A hint of surprise appeared on Jeffrey's face, but it was quickly replaced by an indecipherable smile. He said in a low voice, "If I die, how am I going to do these things? May I ask what happened in Chaos City, Grandpa? Why is it so sudden?" Gloria asked as she looked directly at Jeffrey. "An ancient devil has appeared near Chaos City, and it's about to break out of the seal. All of the powers on the Norland continent have sent powerful beings to reinforce it, but that devil is extremely powerful. Once the seal and the defensive line are broken, Chaos City will be the first to bear the brunt." Jeffrey heaved a forlorn sigh and said, "It's said that the Urba tribe was wiped out because of it." Gloria's eyes gradually widened, and a hint of fear appeared on her face. "We don't have much time left, so you have to sign this letter of confirmation. I'll announce this to all of our people later. After leaving Chaos City, you'll be their leader," Jeffrey said to Gloria. Gloria took a long while to digest this terrifying news and hesitantly asked, "What about you, Grandpa? Aren't you going to leave with us?" "I'll stay." Jeffrey nodded and said, "Chaos City is my hometown. It's the place that made me who I am. Even if I die, I have to die here in peace." "But, sign it. It's getting late, and most of the Buffets should have left by now." "You should leave the city as well," Jeffrey interrupted Gloria. Menard put the confirmation letter in front of Gloria. Gloria looked at Jeffrey's aged face. The light of the past seemed to have faded from his body, and he now looked like an ordinary old man. After roughly scanning through this inheritance confirmation form, Gloria picked up a pen and signed her name in the most solemn section. At this moment, she seemed to feel a strong sense of responsibility falling on her shoulders. It was the responsibility of the rise and fall of a large family. You chose your own path. I hope you won't regret this decision in the future. A rare smile appeared on Jeffrey's face as he looked at Gloria. "Go ahead. Your parents should be waiting for you." Gloria stood up, bowed to Jeffrey, and left. Half an hour passed quickly, and the family members gathered in the front yard again with boxes of various sizes. Gloria also stood in the front row with Lance and the others. "You'll be leaving the city by car in a while, and then transfer to flying steeds to Chaos City." Jeffrey looked at everyone and announced their destination. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. They still didn't understand why they were suddenly going to Rodu, which was thousands of kilometers away. "Before we leave, I have something to announce." Jeffrey interrupted everyone's whispers. He looked at Gloria and said, "From today onwards, Gloria will be the only successor of the family Moraton. If I die, she will automatically become the family leader and be in charge of all matters of the family." Everyone was stunned to hear that, and then a commotion broke out. Gloria and Cyril were fighting for the right of succession. Although Cyril had been reprimanded and punished by Jeffrey for offending Master Rome, Gloria was still young and had only been involved in the family's affairs for a few months. Why would the family leader suddenly make her the only successor? Cyril stood rooted to the spot, as if he had been struck by lightning. Herdy and Herney stared at Gloria with incredulity etched on their faces. Master, did you say something wrong? Why? Why would you suddenly make Gloria the successor? Didn't you agree to let Cyril try again?" Madame Denise asked in a trembling voice. "Yes, father. You can't do that. I'm your son, and she's just a granddaughter who's going to be married off." You can't hand over all the family assets to her. Cyril was also a little flustered, and there was a look of horror on his face. If I don't hand it over to her, am I supposed to hand it over to a wastrel like you? Geoffrey stared coldly at Cyril. How many chances have I given you over the years? When have you ever taken them? If you had any brains left, you wouldn't have done such a thing. Master. Denise still wanted to persuade him. Shut up, you. Geoffrey glanced at her. If you hadn't always spoiled and protected him, he wouldn't have turned into such an idiot. You still have the face to beg for mercy on his behalf? Geoffrey glanced sideways at the sobbing Aviva, Hertie, and Herney. The three of them immediately fell silent. The entire front yard was silent, and Geoffrey's majestic aura was fully displayed at this moment. Everyone couldn't help but look at Gloria, the young girl who used to wear a veil and didn't have much of a presence. After taking off her veil, her beautiful face and outstanding talent in business gradually made her stand out. However, no one would have thought that she would become the only successor of family Moritans so quickly. I've already written and signed the notarial deed. Chaos City and Rodu will acknowledge its validity, so don't try to do anything funny. Otherwise, you'll be kicked out of the family. Geoffrey glanced coldly at Cyril and Denise. Let's go. Livewell. Geoffrey waved his hand and turned to walk slowly into the yard. Everyone was led to the backyard by the servants. There were already over a dozen horse-drawn carriages waiting there. Gloria took one last look at Geoffrey's lonely back and followed her clansmen while holding Mickey's hand. Let's go to Amy's first, Gloria said to the coachman as soon as the horse-drawn carriage drove out of the back gate of the Moritan manor. The coachman looked troubled. But young mistress, master said, we can make it if we hurry up, Gloria said with a firm tone. All right, please take a seat. The coachman nodded, and the horse-drawn carriage sped off. A few minutes later, the horse-drawn carriage stopped outside Amy's. Gloria jumped down from the horse-drawn carriage and quickly walked to the door. She was a little surprised to see the notice hanging on the door, but she quickly rang the bell hanging on the door. Mr. Meg doesn't seem to be home? After knocking on the door for 2 minutes, Gloria gave up with resignation. She turned around and answered her parents' call. She took out a letter and stuffed it under the door, and then ran into the dining room. Mr. Meg should be able to see it, right? Gloria lifted a corner of the curtains and looked at the restaurant that was gradually disappearing behind her as she thought to herself with a troubled expression. Chapter 1788. Irina received 2 letters when she returned to the restaurant. One letter was left for her by Meg. He simply told her that he had already brought Amy and the restaurant's staff north to the Bluegrass Land to avoid danger, and that he would rush back to Chaos City every morning. The other letter was one that she picked up at the door. It seemed to have been stuffed in through the crack of the door. The envelope was light green and had a faint fragrance. The words were written in a graceful handwriting. To Mr. Meg, this unusual color? Irina looked at the envelope in her hand and narrowed her eyes. Her woman's sixth sense told her that this letter was definitely not simple. She knew that there were many young ladies out there who were thinking about Meg, who was a good cook, but she never cared about those common ladies. Of course, she believed that Meg wouldn't have the guts to do that. However, she was still curious about what was written in this letter. Was it a mushy confession? Or was it a bitter resentment? Or was it a love poem from some White Lotus? As a woman who gave birth to his daughter and walked on the line between life and death, it's very appropriate for me to open such a suspicious letter. Irina nodded, and then opened the letter in her hand. Unexpectedly, there was neither a mushy confession nor a bitter confession in the letter. It was also not a love poem. There were only a few lines of graceful handwriting on the white paper. Mr. Meg, please leave Chaos City with Amy immediately and head north to Rodu. The further you go, the better. Please believe me. Chaos City is very dangerous now. Please leave. Please. Gloria? Irina stuffed the letter back. She felt that the name was a little familiar, but she couldn't remember where she had heard it before. She's so affectionate. Even in such a hurry, she didn't forget to remind him to leave with the child. Seems like she knows the inside story. Irina pondered, but her eyes soon narrowed. However, since the situation is so dangerous, why did she specially write a letter to remind him to leave? Judging from the way she addressed him, she probably worships him. She's a young and beautiful girl. Judging from the handwriting, she should be quite good-looking. She has some artistic style. Most of her body is soft and delicate, so it's easy to push her down. Judging from the content, they should know each other and have an unusual relationship. All in all, this is a delicate, youthful, beautiful, and cultured, fair, rich, and beautiful woman. She probably likes him a little, but she hides her feelings very well. However, she doesn't hide her concern at all. She has some tricks up her sleeve. Irina smiled faintly as she stuffed the letter back into the envelope. Meg, who was making arrangements for the bonfire banquet, suddenly sneezed twice. He touched his nose in confusion. After all, he was a LV9 expert. How could he catch a cold? I wonder what's the situation on the other side of the seal, and whether the array formation can be repaired in time. Meg was a little worried. If the seal was unsuccessful, then they could only rely on the 10th-tier powerhouses of the Norland continent. Ugly duckling. Why are you so stupid? Yabamiya, who was at the side, chuckled as he looked at Ugly Duckling, who had been teased by Amy until it spun around a dozen times on the spot before standing still and falling into the soil. Meow. Ugly Duckling pulled its head out of the soil and meowed pitifully with a face full of mud. God is fair. He gave Ugly Duckling an ugly appearance, so he would definitely give it a stupid brain to prevent it from appearing out of place, Amy said seriously. Everyone was slightly taken aback and actually realized that they couldn't refute her. Meow. Ugly Duckling plunged its head back into the soil and shut itself off. In the cave of the seal, the lights were brightly lit, and hundreds of formation masters were busy. Jonas, there's a problem with the carving of the runes. Novin walked over to Jonas, who was guiding a few formation masters in laying down the base materials, with a grave expression. What's wrong? Jonas turned around. These runes are too complicated, and are very different from the runes that formation masters usually carve. Hence, the error rate is extremely high when it comes to actual operation. According to the current progress and success rate, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult to complete the task of setting up the formation before noon tomorrow, Novin said in a low voice. Jonas glanced at the abandoned materials that were piling up at the side, and his brows were tightly furrowed. However, he couldn't blame them. Even he couldn't guarantee that every piece would be successful, let alone these formation masters who were seeing ancient runes for the first time. Summon another 50 formation masters who are good at copying runes. The success rate isn't high, so we can only rely on quantity, Jonas said in a low voice. All right, I'll get them to prepare more materials and send them over. Novin nodded and turned to walk out of the cave. Roar. The octopus monster suddenly crashed into the seal spell formation, causing the barrier to shake. As if it knew what the formation masters were doing, that octopus monster would try to attack the seal spell formation once in a while. The spell formation barrier, which was already in a precarious state, was being worn down by the repeated collisions and seemed like it would collapse at any time. This caused a lot of pressure on the formation masters who were carving the spell formation, and their error rate also increased by a lot. However, Novin had already gotten the earth elemental magic casters to build an earth wall that was hundreds of meters tall outside the spell formation to encircle that octopus monster. It wasn't that they had extravagant hopes that the thin earth wall could block off the octopus monster's attacks. The obstruction in their line of sight could reduce their fear by a lot. Jonas looked in the direction of the seal worriedly and turned to walk towards Barbara, who was doing some supporting work at the side. Your Highness, you should leave this place now. Jonas came to Barbara's side and set up a small soundproof spell formation. Leave? Master, the spell formation hasn't been set up yet. Barbara was puzzled. It's too dangerous here. We can't guarantee that we can set up a new spell formation before it collapses, and we don't know what kind of terrifying power this devil has after it breaks out of the seal, Jonas said with a grave expression. Therefore, you and His Majesty have to return to the Moon Nation immediately and cut off the teleportation portal between the Moon Nation and the Norland continent to prevent the devil from entering the Moon Nation through the teleportation portal. But the three of them and I will stay behind to help them set up a new spell formation, but we have to ensure the safety of you and His Majesty. Barbara looked at Jonas' worried and sincere face and hesitated for a while before nodding. All right. Then, Master, you must take care. Don't worry, Your Highness. We will be fine. A smile appeared on Jonas' face. Half an hour later, the fastest golden falcon took off from Chaos City and flew towards the various races. Not long after, the various races' flying steeds all took off to reinforce Chaos City. They carried the top powerhouses of each race to reinforce Chaos City. Chaos City entered a state of emergency. Chapter 1789. Residents of Chaos City, I am Michael. Chaos City and the Norland continent are facing an unprecedented crisis. We need all of you to return home immediately. All residents who are able to fight, please report to the City Lord's castle. We need your help. We need you to protect Chaos City with us, protect our homes, and the people we cherish. The most powerful beings on the Norland continent are about to arrive at Chaos City. We will resist this crisis together. Michael's voice spread throughout Chaos City through the loudspeakers. The city gates of Chaos City slowly closed, and the merchants and caravans that were queuing up to enter the city were quickly let through. The soldiers lined up on the city walls with their crossbows aimed outside the city, and their expressions were solemn and vigilant. The pedestrians on the streets hurriedly returned home with confused and panicked expressions. In all these years, Chaos City had never put on such a grand display. However, there were also many residents who walked out of their homes and gathered at the City Lord's castle. The residents of Chaos City had been taught peace and unity since they were young. When peace was no longer there, the residents of Chaos City had to unite in order to allow Chaos City to continue to exist on the Norland continent. Hence, after the City Lord's request was sent out, tens of thousands of residents walked out of their homes and reported to the City Lord's castle. Vivian, what are you doing? Monica stopped Vivian, who was wearing red armor with a long sword hanging from her waist, and was about to walk out of the courtyard. Mother, I want to go and fight with Father. Vivian pressed down on the long sword with her hand, and her tone and expression were very determined. You don't even know how to use a sword. Do you know what that thing is? How are you going to fight it? Monica asked angrily. Those people outside don't know either, but they still came. Vivian looked at the door and could vaguely hear the commotion in the front yard. That was the sound of the residents who had gathered. Mother, I have armor and a long sword. I used to practice swordsmanship with Father. I am the City Lord's daughter, and I am also a resident of Chaos City. At a time like this, I should be standing on the city walls and fighting alongside everyone, and not hiding at home or running away like a coward. Vivian looked at Monica. Monica stared at Vivian for a long time, and a tear fell from the corner of her eye. She let go of Vivian's arm and turned her head away. Go. I won't stop you. Don't worry. I will come back safely because I still have to protect you. Vivian hugged Monica gently before leaving with her long sword. This child is exactly like her father. Monica stood at the door and looked at Vivian's back as she wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. At the city gate, a bunch of burly men were carrying a lot of prey. Mond looked at Sargeras. He asked Sargeras. He looked at Sargeras well. Sargeras pondered for a moment, and then said, Heel, take 2 people and submit the mission. The rest of you, follow me to the City Lord's castle to report. Sargeras. Sargeras led the dozens of demons of the Burning Legion toward the City Lord's castle. Dicus quickly walked into the meeting hall and informed Michael, who was having a discussion with the officials, My lord, there are already more than 100,000 residents who have come to report to the City Lord's castle. Currently, the staff is overloaded with registration work. As expected of the residents of Chaos City, a smile appeared on Michael's face. The residents were much more enthusiastic than he had expected. We don't need so many people on the city wall. Inform everyone that the 5th tier will be the dividing line. All the powerhouses who are 5th tier and above will be registered and sent to the front line. Those who are 5th tier and below will be the reserve troops. They will not be registered. Go back home first and wait for your summons, Michael said to Dicus. Also, Dicus went closer to Michael and lowered his voice. Miss Vivian is also in the crowd. She wants to go up the city wall. This lass. Michael was shocked, but he also smiled with relief. He pondered for a while and said, "Write down her name, but don't let her go up the city wall in case she becomes a burden. Let her be in charge of clearing the streets and evacuating the crowd." "All right." Dicus nodded and left quickly. Michael then looked at the officials present and said, "The reinforcements from the various races are already on the way. It is estimated that there will be over 100 10th-tier powerhouses. We have to prepare for the worst. If the seal is not rebuilt before the old seal is broken, and the 10th-tier powerhouses alliance is unable to stop that devil, all of you and I will have to live and die with Chaos City." All the officials looked worried, but no one showed any intention of backing down. "City Lord, should we inform the residents of the current situation? Should we carry out the evacuation plan?" An elderly official asked. They should have the right to know. However, the devil's theory does not have much meaning other than increasing the residents' fear and making it easier for that devil to control everyone. It might even cause chaos in advance. Michael shook his head. If Chaos City is unable to stop it, there is no point in evacuating. Even if we evacuate to Rodu, will it be able to stop it? Everyone fell silent. That was the reality. Michael looked at everyone and said, "What we have to do now is to satisfy the Formation Master's requests at all costs and provide strong support to the powerhouses of the various races who are fighting at the front line." Outside Chaos City, a merfolk powerhouse looked at Dexter perplexedly and asked, "High Priest, are we also going to help them with the entire race's strength?" "Yes, Chief. We have just been freed from the seal at the bottom of the sea with Mr. Meg's help. We should be protecting the safety of Mr. Meg and his daughter. We don't have to risk our lives for these people who are completely unrelated to us, right?" Another merfolk powerhouse chimed in. All the merfolk looked at Dexter. "Mr. Meg said before that no egg can remain intact when the nest is overturned. All of you have seen how powerful that devil is with your own eyes. If it really breaks through the seal, not only will the Norland continent be plunged into misery and suffering, even if we hide at the bottom of the sea, I'm afraid we will also be killed." Dexter shook his head with a worried expression and said, "This is not only a test for Chaos City, but also a test for the entire world. No one can avoid it." All the merfolk were deep in thought and no longer had any doubts. Not long after, the powerhouses from the various races arrived at Chaos City one after another. Michael received them personally and brought them straight to the Thunderstorm Mountains, where they went into alert mode. There are so many 10th-tier powerhouses in the Roth Empire. There are so many of them. They have more than all of our orc tribes combined. Connie stood beside Rex and was speechless as he looked at the powerhouses from the Roth Empire who were camped on the mountain next door. No pop-up window. Chapter 1790. There were many mountains of various sizes in the Thunderstorm Mountains. That sealed place happened to be in the middle of the mountains, so the powerhouses from the various races each occupied a mountain when they arrived. The Roth Empire sent over 40 10th-tier powerhouses. Half of them were magic casters and flying knights, so they occupied the largest mountain. Meanwhile, the orcs, who had 10 odd 10th-tier powerhouses next door, were obviously much weaker in terms of presence. Although Oster, who had lost an arm, was indignant, he could only swallow his dissatisfaction when he saw that there were almost 3 times more powerhouses than him. The top 10 powerhouses of the demon tribe had all sent their powerhouses. Although they didn't squeeze together because of the difference in aura, there were still 20 odd of them. The trolls sent over 10 powerhouses. As they were too tall, they would be easily struck by the active lightning in the Thunderstorm Mountains if they stood at a high place, so they chose to stand in a valley. Although they wouldn't die from being electrocuted, it wasn't elegant enough. The dwarves and goblins were a little shabby as they only had 6 10th-tier powerhouses. Meanwhile, the elves only had 5 10th-tier powerhouses. Helena wasn't present. However, everyone knew what had happened to the elves during this period, so they didn't say much. All the 10th-tier powerhouses in Chaos City were present. There were a total of 10 of them, and 3 of them were hidden powerhouses who came voluntarily after hearing the City Lord's call. The powerhouses from the Giant Dragon tribe came one after another. All kinds of giant dragons landed, attracting everyone's attention. There were a total of 40 giant dragons, which showed the giant dragon tribe's powerful heritage. The 10 powerhouses from Lantis stood at the side quietly. The Moon Nation's representative team was also present. The king was the leader, but Barbara wasn't in the team. Apart from the various races' representatives, there were also some free people present. For example, Crassus, Julian, and the rather eye-catching Irina. I heard Alex is also in Chaos City. Why don't I see him? The Storm Dragon cousins asked Irina loudly. Why? You want to fight him one-on-one? Irina asked him with a cold smile as she looked up at him. Cousins choked and couldn't help but shrink his neck. This woman wasn't a good person. The Norland continent's consensus was that the giant dragons were powerful. However, the rise of the Roth Empire in the past 100 years made the powerhouses of the various races think differently. 40 10th-tier powerhouses were already on par with the giant dragons. Josh was not lying yesterday. With the power of the Roth Empire, they could probably conquer half of the Norland continent. No one would have thought that the human race, which was still weak 100 years ago, would grow so quickly and terrifyingly. Michael emerged from the ground and looked at the powerful beings of the various races. The spell formation masters are still working hard to repair the spell formation, but the old seal formation is already on the verge of collapsing under the attack of that devil. So all of you can only guard here tonight to prevent it from breaking out of the seal. If you ask me, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Just let it out. We have more than 100 level 10 people here. If each of us gives it a hit, no matter what it is, it'll be reduced to dust. Cousins looked unconcerned. That's right. Isn't it just an old thing that has been sealed for a few hundred years? There are so many of us. Why should we be afraid of it? An abyss demon chimed in. The representatives of the various races who had witnessed the terrifying strength of the demon yesterday rolled their eyes one after another. This kind of judgment was not applicable to that guy. A demon with the highest magic and physical resistance, a terrifying self-recovery ability, and an extremely strong attack power was not something that could be dealt with simply by adding up the power of a level 10 powerhouse. Cousins, stop looking down on me. That fellow only used 2 tentacles to almost kill me. You have to know that it has thousands of tentacles, and it can even recover from all its injuries in a short period of time, Franklin said coldly. The powerhouses of the various races all changed slightly when they heard that. Although they already knew about their target before coming, hearing it from Franklin's mouth was still very impactful. One had to know that the Tyrannosaurus dragon was a very proud existence, and Franklin was one of the top powerhouses on the Norland continent who had been famous for thousands of years. Cousins opened his mouth. He looked at Lewis and Douglas, who had the same sullen faces, and shut his mouth in the end. The atmosphere in the Thunderstorm Mountains suddenly became a little stifling. The powerhouses of the various races stopped looking down on them and began to arrange their troops under Chaos City's arrangement. The powerhouses of the various races had all reached the 10th tier, but they all had different attacking methods. There were magic casters and archers who were good at long-range attacks, flying knights and warriors of the various races who were good at close-range attacks, giant dragons who were good at aerial attacks, goblins who were good at sneak attacks, and forest trolls who had crowd control skills. How to arrange the powerhouses of the various races so that they could cooperate with each other and unleash a stronger and more effective killing power became a very important matter. The night gradually deepened, and bonfires lit up in the Thunderstorm Mountains. The powerhouses of the various races had already taken up their respective suitable positions and obtained a unified battle strategy. Once the seal was broken, the formation masters would retreat from the battlefield immediately before the new seal was completed. The real battlefield would be in the wider Thunderstorm Mountains, and not in the narrow and sealed cave. Go back to Chaos City first, Rex said to Connie, who was squatting by the bonfire, rubbing her hands. No, I am also a woman who wants to save the world. How can I leave at such an important time? Connie shook her head. If you stay here, you will only distract the people who are supposed to save the world from saving you, Rex said expressionlessly. Master, you are too much. Connie looked aggrieved. Over there. Rex pointed in the direction of Chaos City. Connie stared at Rex's face for a while, and after making sure that he had no intention of changing his mind, she could only get up and prepare to return to the city. Help send her back to Chaos City. You have to send her to the City Lord's castle, Rex instructed as he got up and pulled her to a knight from the City Lord's castle. Master, I can really go back by myself? Connie looked helpless. Rex instructed again. Get the people from the City Lord's castle to send her back to her courtyard. Yes. That knight nodded seriously and sped towards Chaos City with Connie, who looked like she had nothing to live for. Many people on the Norland continent couldn't sleep that night. Meg, on the other hand, had a good night's sleep. However, he woke up early in the morning and left a note for everyone. The congee with pork and century egg was placed over the bonfire, and he secretly rode on the purple-striped griffin that landed silently and left the blue grassland. All the way north, the ordinary living beings of the various races on the Norland continent still started their normal day. They didn't know that in the center of the entire continent, a crisis was brewing to the point where it was about to break apart. The purple-striped griffin let out a long howl and then landed in the thunderstorm mountains under everyone's gaze. Alex. Everyone turned to look at the man sitting on the griffin. Critical. The demons are crashing crazily, and the seal barrier is about to break. The new sealing array was only a step away from completion. We need to buy some time for the formation masters. Just then, Novin rushed out from the cave and shouted at the powerhouses present. Chapter 1791. Meg had just landed on the purple-striped griffin and was interrupted by Novin's voice before he could get used to everyone's attention. It was only morning, and the octopus monster was about to break out of its seal. It was half a day earlier than the expected time. However, the powerhouses of the various races were already in position. At a glance, it felt as if there were 10th-tier powerhouses everywhere. 90% of the top powerhouses of the Norland continent had gathered for this blockade. There was no other formation that was stronger than this on the Norland continent. However, everyone's expression changed slightly when they heard Novin shout. Let's attack together and destroy this tunnel first. Otherwise, we won't be able to attack freely, Cousin suggested. Giant dragons could only unleash their full power in their giant dragon form. The underground tunnel was too narrow for them. Furthermore, the powerhouses had already set up their formation. If they went underground now, they would lose the advantage of working together. The sealed land is 1,000 meters underground. By the time you blast open a new tunnel, it would have already broken out of the seal. Mag glanced at that big fellow. This suggestion was not only worthless, but also a little stupid. Novin glanced at Meg before looking at the powerhouses. We need 30 powerhouses who can restrict the devil from a distance. The spell formation masters will need another 15 minutes to complete the new sealing spell formation. As long as we can activate the new sealing spell formation and reseal it, the crisis will be resolved. Count me in. Irina stepped forward. I'm an archer. An elf with a longbow stepped forward. Crassus shouted. All the long-range magic casters of the Magus Tower, step forward. Yes. 10 magic casters stepped forward almost at the same time and answered in unison. The rest of the magic casters subconsciously looked at Richard, whose face was a little dark, and hesitated if they should step forward. Step forward. Richard stepped forward with a frown. Almost all the magic casters of the Magus Tower stepped forward at the same time. The demons, forest trolls, goblins, and other long-range powerhouses stepped forward, and soon formed a team of 30 people. Meg was at most a close combat warrior. He didn't need to go into battle at a time like this, so he stood aside tactfully. 30 top-tier long-range magic casters and powerhouses working together just to stop that octopus monster for 15 minutes. Moreover, there were many control magic casters among them, so it shouldn't be a problem. Ding! Emergency mission activated. Please assist in sealing the octopus monster. Mission success. You will receive a recipe for the octopus series. Mission failure. Use an entire octopus sashimi. At this moment, the system's voice suddenly rang in his mind. Huh? Thinking of the octopus tentacles full of eyeballs, Meg raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, I'll go with you. Then, he strode forward to catch up with the others who had already begun to enter the catacombs. Alex, don't tell me he's going to slay that devil? Everyone looked at Meg, who was the last to jump into the catacombs. As a knight, Alex should not have the ability to attack from a distance. Everyone quickly passed through the passage and entered the sealed cave. The earth wall had already been removed, leaving only the thin array barrier that was on the verge of collapse under the impact of the octopus monster. Fine cracks had already begun to spread across the barrier, and it could collapse at any time. The theme of the new ceiling array had been completed. Tens of thousands of complex runes flickered with a faint light, like the stars in the sky. The exhausted array masters stood at the entrance of the cave and watched the cautious Jonas and the other two top-notch array masters activate the array. The scattered runes were linked together, turning the ceiling array into a complete array. This was the last and most important step. As if sensing the threat, the octopus monster crazily attacked the ceiling array. Its tentacles were corroded by the seal barrier, but it was completely unable to stop its frenzied attacks. Avoid the new array and attack that octopus monster. Stop it from continuing to attack the seal. Crassus roared angrily. As he raised his hand, a fire dragon rushed out of his magic caster's staff and charged toward the octopus monster. Julian did not say much. He silently chanted a spell, and the temperature in the area of the ceiling array plummeted as if it was shrouded in ice and snow. An ice phoenix broke out from the ice above and charged toward the octopus monster, entangling with the fire dragon that rushed into the array. Roar! The octopus monster let out an angry roar and raised a dozen tentacles to entangle the ice phoenix and fire dragon. Boom! Before the tentacles could land, the ice phoenix and the fire dragon had already collided. The collision of extreme heat and extreme cold caused an instant explosion. At the center of the explosion, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and the tentacles that were broken into countless pieces fell to the ground. The octopus monster was also pushed back a little by the shock wave of the explosion. Its forward momentum suddenly stopped, and it let out an angry roar. So powerful! The powerhouses and the array masters who had yet to leave were all shocked when they saw this scene. The terrifying power that erupted from the joint attack of the God of Fire and the Lord of Ice was no longer a simple combination of two 10th-tier powerhouses. Was this inspired by Amy? Meg, on the other hand, raised his eyebrows. The combination of ice and fire was Amy's specialty. Crassus and Julian's joint attack caused a certain amount of damage to the octopus monster. This made the powerhouses, who were originally nervous, very excited. They also released their spells and skills to attack the octopus monster. In an instant, dozens of powerful spells and enchanted arrows flew toward the octopus monster in the center of the ceiling array. Hiss! The octopus monster seemed to be completely enraged. It let out a piercing sound that made one's eardrums burst. The countless tentacles that were originally coiled under its body started to dance at the same time. Like a wall of tentacles, the spells and arrows landed on the wall of tentacles like stones thrown into the sea. Apart from some sounds and a few broken tentacles, they actually didn't cause any substantial damage. What a terrifying defense! Its tentacles are regenerating. It's coming out. The powerhouse's expressions changed drastically. They had never experienced a battle with such a huge disparity in strength, nor had they seen such a powerful opponent. A sense of helplessness rose in them as they watched the surging tentacles hit the ceiling barrier that was full of cracks. 5 more minutes. Jonas, who was sweating profusely, shouted loudly. The iron pin in his hand moved like a dragon, and the golden liquid formed runes one after another. More than half of the spell formation had already lit up. There's no time. Let the array masters retreat first and lure this guy out before fighting, Julian said in a low voice. Let's go. Novan waved his hand, and the array masters who were originally standing outside the cave were dragged in the direction of the cave. Bam! The ceiling barrier shattered instantly under the pressure of the countless tentacles, and the ancient spell formation that had existed for countless years was completely destroyed. The 3 human magic casters closest to the ceiling spell formation were instantly sent flying. A second before they hit the wall, they were teleported to the entrance of the cave by Novan's spatial magic. Everyone, retreat. Novan roared with a serious expression. The group of powerhouses started to retreat in the direction of the cave. Cover me. Seeing that the situation had turned around in an instant, Meg shouted at Irina and Julian, who hadn't retreated yet, and charged towards the octopus monster with his sword. Brother Octopus, let's transcend the tribulation together. Meg looked at the countless octopus tentacles that were surging towards him and broke into a smile. He pointed the long sword in his hand towards the sky. Lightning, come. Chapter 1792. The dazzling holy light illuminated the cave, as well as the figure that was moving in the opposite direction. The powerhouses that were retreating to the entrance of the cave looked over, unable to hide their shock. Alex was powerful, but the combined efforts of more than 30 10th-tier powerhouses were unable to effectively stop the octopus monster. How could he stop it alone? Boom! A loud sound exploded between heaven and earth. Above the thunderstorm mountains, a 9-colored tribulation cloud suddenly appeared, spinning rapidly above the seal like a vortex. Lightning and thunder reverberated in the tribulation cloud. What's that? The powerhouses of various races that were waiting outside the cave looked at the tribulation cloud that suddenly appeared in the sky, and their expressions changed drastically. The flashing lightning in the tribulation cloud had a terrifying power that struck fear in people's hearts. Accompanied by a loud crack, a purple-gold tribulation thunder rushed out of the tribulation cloud like a furious dragon and landed in the center of the circle formed by the crowd. At this moment, in the sealed cave, the octopus monster that was temporarily obstructed by the holy light stared at Meg, who was rushing forward alone. Countless tentacles surged toward him like a tide and instantly drowned him. What is this kid doing? Crassus was shocked. He slammed his magic caster's staff on the ground, and 2 golden-red fire dragons flew toward the octopus monster in a crisscross manner. They nimbly avoided the tentacles on the periphery and then exploded, trying to blast a path for Alex. Julian acted almost at the same time, and the entire sealed space was instantly frozen. The cold air almost condensed into a solid substance, but it only slowed down the octopus monster's movements slightly. Irina's expression was still calm, but her eyes were glistening with tears. The dazzling holy light rushed out of the magic caster's staff again, following the space created by Crassus fire dragons, trying to find the figure that was buried by countless tentacles. What a pity! Everyone couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. A legendary knight of a generation had fallen, and he paid the price for his rashness in the end. At this moment, a purple-gold lightning pierced through the rock strata that were thousands of meters long and appeared above the cave, striking the octopus monster with a loud bang. The unstoppable octopus monster that was rolling its tentacles was suddenly struck by the lightning, and its tentacles instantly froze. A wisp of white smoke rose from the top of its head, emitting a burnt smell. Where did the lightning come from? The experts who were preparing to retreat couldn't help but widen their eyes when they saw this scene. They looked at the octopus monster in disbelief. They could feel the terrifying thunderstorm power contained in the purple-gold lightning. Although they were in the thunderstorm mountains, they were already 1,000 meters underground. How could the lightning strike the octopus monster so accurately? Tribulation lightning. Irina's eyes lit up. She suddenly understood the meaning of Meg's words. She had seen such lightning in the endless sea. Don't be afraid. We brothers will share our blessings and suffer together. A voice came from under the octopus tentacles. As the saber light flashed, the 10-odd tentacles were chopped into countless pieces, revealing the unscathed Meg. Alex is not dead. Could he be the one who attracted the lightning? But isn't he a knight? When did he master lightning? Everyone looked at this scene with excitement and doubt. This move. I seem to have seen it somewhere before, a terror demon expert said with a strange expression. Mr. Meg is indeed the one chosen by God. Dexter slowly put down the crystal ball in his hand and looked at Meg with admiration. Quick, continue to draw the formation. We might still be in time. Jonas glanced at the young man in front of the demon. Although he wasn't sure of his identity, he was definitely a true warrior. His courage and strength might be able to buy them some precious time. Roar! The octopus monster seemed to be enraged by Meg as it let out a sharp roar. At the same time, countless tentacles slammed down on Meg. It wanted this insignificant fellow to pay the price for his arrogance. Layers and layers of tentacles surged toward him, but Mag was still in a trance. He stood rooted to the spot. The powerful mind control from the Great Old One caused his thoughts to stop almost instantly. It was as if a black cage was cast in his mind. He even lost control of his body and couldn't perceive everything around him. "No!" Irina exclaimed. A ray of holy light penetrated through the gaps between the tentacles and landed on Meg's body. As if the morning sun had torn through the dark night sky, Meg felt the cage that trapped him disappear instantly. When he opened his eyes, a tentacle was already on his face. His sword was very fast, but Brother Octopus was too benevolent. The lightning tribulation had yet to fall on him, and he was only a level 9 after all. This meant that no matter how fast his sword was, he couldn't cut off this octopus tentacle. Fortunately, he still had a kitchen knife. His kitchen knife was also very fast. The light of the knife flashed, and the tentacle with a burnt smell broke off before it could hit Meg's head. It fell to the ground weakly. "No matter how strong you are, my kitchen knife will teach you how to be a man." Meg put away fat head fish and began to dance among the tentacles with his long sword. At the same time, he complained in his heart, "System, where is my lightning? Is there such a big delay?" Maybe the heavenly axiom is evaluating the level of intervention and brewing the appropriate level of lightning, the system said calmly. "Take it easy, don't send Dad away too." Meg shuttled between the tentacles and was surrounded by countless tentacles again. Fortunately, these tentacles were too thick. After Meg got close to them, it was difficult to use them, and they could always find a place for him to hide. However, this space was quickly shrinking. The octopus monster's tentacle-covered eyes were not just for decoration. "Let's help him." The experts who were about to leave saw this scene and returned to the cave, ready to attack. "Don't attack. My lightning doesn't recognize people." Meg's voice came from the octopus monster. Boom! Another thunderclap rang out. This time, 3 bolts of purple gold lightning struck down from the top of the cave. Each bolt of lightning was more than twice the size of the previous one. Hiss! The octopus monster looked up at the lightning bolts and made a sound of fear. Everyone stepped back subconsciously and watched the 3 lightning bolts fall. The glaring lightning bolts were even brighter than the holy light. The void distorted under the lightning strikes. The situation of the octopus monster and Alex, who were in the center of the lightning bolts, couldn't be seen at the moment. However, these 3 lightning bolts were really terrifying. They were wrapped in the power of heaven and earth. Even a 10th-level expert could only retreat, not daring to touch them. Everyone stared at the center of the lightning bolts nervously. Half of the 5 minutes had passed. Was Alex still alive? How did he attract such terrifying lightning bolts? Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1793. It's uncomfortable. Meg, who was trapped under the octopus monster's tentacles, was also electrocuted. His whole body was numb, and he couldn't move. Although Brother Octopus had honestly blocked most of the lightning tribulation for him, he didn't expect the octopus to be a conductor. After the lightning tribulation fell on the octopus monster, it was indirectly transmitted to him. Fortunately, after the lightning tribulation pierced through the octopus monster's body, it passed through an octopus-shaped electrical resistance before landing on his body. The amount of electricity was just right. Not only did it achieve the effect of clearing his blood vessels, but it also prevented him from being struck to death due to the intensity of the lightning. After being struck twice in a row, the arrogant octopus monster finally became a little scared. Its thousands of eyeballs rolled around and stared at the top of the cave. It didn't dare to move for a while. The inky black mud on the octopus's surface had been disintegrated by the thunder. However, after being struck by 3 thunderbolts, the octopus's surface turned black. It looked a little funny. The crowd, who had been defeated by the octopus monster, looked at this scene. While feeling refreshed, they also had bigger questions about Alex. Everyone knew that Alex was the most powerful knight in history. He had the powerful strength to fight a giant dragon in close combat. However, what he showed today was his powerful ability to control thunder and lightning. The terrifying thunder and lightning that came out of nowhere even stunned the invincible demon. However, they were more concerned about whether Alex, who had disappeared, was still alive in the terrifying thunder. At this moment, the powerhouses of various clans who were waiting outside the cave looked at the tin-colored thunder clouds spinning wildly in the sky. They were all shocked and doubtful. The terrifying thunder and lightning that fell one after another had smashed a deep dark pit in the middle of the crowd. Moreover, they were sure that the target of the thunder and lightning was not the ground. The penetrating thunder and lightning's target was most likely underground. To be able to cause such terrifying thunder and lightning, the crowd could only think of one possibility: the demon. However, they didn't know what the situation was like underground at this time. Had the new seal formation been built? Had the demon broken the old seal? The seal has been broken. Alex is fighting with the demon. At this time, the first batch of formation masters withdrew from the cave. Facing the crowd's questioning, one of them answered loudly, "Alex." Everyone was surprised. Could it be that Alex was the one who made such a scene? I heard that a few months ago, Alex lured Lightning to fight against the feared demon powerhouses in the Endless Sea realm and killed the Bar Hill, Douglas said in a deep voice. The few experts from the Fear Fiend clan who came to help turned their faces away, but looking at the spinning tribulation clouds in the sky, they had to admit that the scene today was indeed somewhat familiar. I didn't expect Alex to be so powerful after his return after disappearing for 3 years. Even I have to avoid such terrifying lightning, Lewis lamented. Could it be that he has already broken through level 10 and reached the legendary realm? Franklin exclaimed. As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd immediately went into an uproar. On the Norland continent, the 10th tier was the pinnacle. Even someone as strong as Lewis, who had lived for thousands of years, was only slightly stronger than an ordinary 10th tier powerhouse. However, he was far from the gap between 10th tier and 9th tier. It had always been a mystery whether there were stronger beings above level 10. Some people said that the gods worshipped by the various races were the powerhouses who had broken through the 10th tier shackles. However, the Norland continent had already cut off communication with the gods, so no one knew if this was true. Today, the terrifying lightning that Alex lured over made all the powerhouses present feel the terrifying power. Even giant dragons with strong physical bodies didn't dare to say that they would be left with much after taking a bolt of lightning head-on. The tribulation clouds in the sky that had yet to disperse contained even greater terror. It was like the wrath of heaven and earth. It made one shudder and even want to bow down. How did he become so powerful? Josh, who was standing afar, heard everyone's words, and his face became extremely pale. He stared at that cave with his reddened eyes. He had never wanted that devil to rush out and kill that fellow who had suppressed him for over a decade as much as he did now. Right at this moment, the third wave of lightning darted out from the tribulation clouds along with a loud boom. This time, the number of lightning bolts increased from 3 to 5. The 5-colored tribulation lightning bolts came together, and the sky changed color as they struck down again. All the powerhouses retreated quickly, afraid that they would be affected by the terrifying lightning. If they were hit by this lightning, they would probably be reduced to ashes. Meanwhile, Meg, who was pressed under the octopus tentacles, had almost lost all the space to move. Just as he was about to take out the fat head fish, the thunder boomed again. Before the 5 bolts of lightning struck down, they actually twisted into a 5-colored tribulation lightning bolt. The lightning bolt that was as thick as the octopus monster's head smashed onto its head. The thunder and lightning were accompanied by the octopus monster's ear-piercing screams. The 5-colored lightning almost penetrated its body, and even its internal organs were illuminated by the lightning. Countless octopus tentacles swung around unconsciously, shattering the mountain rocks. The cave shook as though it was going to collapse at any time. Julian propped up an ice wall that was only as tall as a person in time, and blocked Jonas and the new spell formation behind the ice wall, allowing the octopus tentacles to slide across the ice surface smoothly. As for Meg, who was hiding in the octopus tentacles, he wasn't so lucky as to rely on the octopus monster to survive the tribulation lightning. In addition to the lightning that penetrated the octopus monster's body and landed on him, A five-colored lightning bolt that was like a long snake actually bypassed the octopus monster, passing through the gaps between the tentacles and blasting onto his head. The lightning struck his head like an axe falling from his head. Then, it turned into countless small axes, slashing and smashing his cells one by one. He couldn't help but let out a long howl from the extreme pain. This was a process that kept repeating. The lightning passed through his body, and every part of his body repeatedly broke and reformed. Even though Meg had already experienced 9 lightning tribulations, the 9 previous lightning tribulations added together weren't as painful and torturous as this one. He even had the urge to take out the fat headfish and stab himself. However, he had already lost control of his body. He couldn't even turn his head, let alone hold the knife. He widened his eyes, trying to find something that could attract his attention. Then, he saw that there was actually a golden egg in the octopus monster's body that was illuminated by the lightning. What's that? Meg's eyes gradually widened. Could it be that the octopus was born from an egg? However, even Neza only had a difficult birth for 3 years. This fellow had been sealed here for countless years. Would it be constipated even when giving birth to an egg? Before Meg could take a closer look, the pain in his body suddenly disappeared, and the octopus monster's body returned to normal. Meg clenched his fist, and an unprecedented feeling of power filled his body. At the same time, he instantly grasped all the combat skills that could only be used and unleashed to the extreme in his mind that could only be used at level 10. So this is what it feels like to be at level 10? Meg's lips curled into a smile. He glanced at Jonas, who was about to complete the new seal, and took a deep breath. Now, it was time to display his true strength. Although the octopus monster's aura was much weaker, it still managed to endure this tribulation. At the same time, it noticed that the new seal formation was about to close, and it immediately became manic. Dozens of octopus tentacles were raised and smashed toward Jonas. Boom. At this moment, there was another clap of thunder. Fuck, why is there still more? Meg was shocked. His strength had already increased to level 10, so this lightning tribulation should have been considered over. The external aid that the host has brought in is too powerful. The heavenly axiom may have determined that this is a violation of the rules, so an additional heavenly tribulation is sent down. The energy of this heavenly tribulation is too great. With the host's physical fitness and mental endurance, the system suggests, lie flat. The system's voice sounded, lying flat can avoid lightning? Meg asked, you can leave in peace. Goodbye, host. Perhaps we can meet again in the next world. The system played an unforgettable night. Meg. Bulge. Fuck. No pop-up window. Chapter 1794. After successfully overcoming the tribulation, the lightning tribulation did not disperse. I'm panicking. Fellow cultivators, is there any way to resolve this? Meg was really panicking now, looking at the similarly trembling octopus monster beside him, not knowing if it was the aftereffects of being struck by lightning or just as panicked. He felt a little comforted. Come on, brother octopus. You can do it. Withstand this wave, and we will win. Come on. Meg clenched his fists and started to encourage Brother Octopus. Alex is still alive. Everyone also noticed Meg, who was flashing between the octopus tentacles. While they were amazed that he could survive such a terrifying lightning tribulation, they were also deeply worried about the rolling lightning tribulation that had yet to disperse. The spell formation is about to be completed. Let's work together to block that octopus monster. Let's let Alex come out first. This lightning is making me a little scared, Crassus said to Irina. I'm afraid he can't withstand a stronger lightning tribulation, Julian said with a grave expression. Although he felt that Alex's aura seemed to be stronger than before, he didn't really think that he could control lightning. He was a knight, after all, and such powerful lightning was something that even a 10th-tier lightning magic caster couldn't do. I'm afraid even he can't stop it. Irina couldn't hide the anxiety in her eyes, but she still remembered Meg's previous instructions and didn't act rashly. Outside the underground cavern, all the powerhouses looked at the crazily spinning thunderclouds in the sky. Rolling thunder came from the thunderclouds, nurturing great terror. The previous 5 lightning tribulations were already terrifying. Now, it contained the power to destroy heaven and earth as if the wrath of heaven and earth was about to descend. What exactly is Alex doing? Is he going to attract the lightning tribulation to kill that devil? Such a terrifying lightning tribulation is not something we can withstand. Alex most likely can't withstand it either. Is he going to sacrifice himself for the Norland continent? This spirit is really admirable and touching. All the powerhouses sighed as they retreated 100 meters, afraid that they would be affected by the lightning tribulation. Attracting lightning to strike yourself, Alex. I want to see if your life is really harder than that of a devil. Josh's lips curled into a cold smile. Meg really didn't want to sacrifice himself. His greatest ambition was to sacrifice Brother Octopus. However, the current situation did not seem good. The heavenly tribulation had already gone out of control. Although the octopus monster was also panicking, it could not help but raise its tentacles and smack Meg. It seemed to have realized that it was this hateful guy who had attracted the terrifying lightning. Meg flipped the heavy sword in his hand. His feet moved, and his figure shot out like an arrow. Without dodging, he slashed at the octopus tentacle. A silver sword light flashed on the tip of the sword. It was restrained, but did not lose its sharpness. Sharp edge. It was the simplest and most effective basic sword technique. The heavy sword swung upwards and slashed at the octopus tentacles. The originally tough octopus tentacles were now easily cut off by Meg's sword like tofu. Meg raised his eyebrows. Level 10 was indeed different. Whether it was strength or control of sword skills, it was on a completely different level from level 9. At this moment, he finally felt a perfect fit with the heavy sword in his hand. With the long sword in hand, the world was mine. On a whim, he cut off a few more tentacles. It was so easy to cut. The octopus monster roared in pain. However, before it could do anything to Meg, the new heavenly tribulation had already descended. The 10-colored heavenly tribulation descended from the sky like 10 10-colored giant dragons darting out from the crazily spinning tribulation clouds. All the lightning within a radius of tens of kilometers in the thunderstorm mountains was drawn out almost instantly. The dazzling lightning lit up half the sky, and even the sun's light was overshadowed. Even Chaos City, which was far away, noticed the phenomenon that happened tens of kilometers away. The 10 lightning dragons, which carried the might of heaven and earth, suddenly entered the underground cavern. Meg and the octopus monster stopped what they were doing at the same time and looked up. 10 terrifying lightning dragons darted out from the top of their heads and smashed towards them at the same time. The two of them seemed to be rooted to the spot. They did not try to dodge or escape. Done. Jonas put away his brush and exclaimed in surprise. The new ceiling spell formation lit up, and a translucent curtain wall rose out of thin air, filling up the octopus monster again. Meanwhile, Jonas' body was suddenly pulled backward by a force, and he left the ceiling area instantly. At the same time, 10 terrifying lightning bolts landed on the octopus monster and Meg at the same time, under the watchful eyes of everyone in the underground cavern. Each of those terrifying lightning bolts had a diameter of more than 3 meters and contained the terrifying power of lightning. All the 10th tier powerhouses present were sure that any random lightning bolt could turn them into ashes, let alone being hit by 10 lightning bolts at the same time. The 10 colored lightning bolts landed on the same spot, and the entire ceiling spell formation was enveloped by the terrifying lightning. The dazzling lightning bolts made it hard for people to look at them directly, and the terrifying power made the powerhouses who had already retreated to the entrance of the cavern not dare to go forward rashly. That devil should be dead already, right? After a long while, one of the mages asked softly. Actually, he didn't finish his sentence. There was another possibility that was more likely. It was just that no one was willing to mention it. The new ceiling spell formation had been built, and Alex had completed his mission of stalling for time. Regardless of whether that devil was dead or alive, the Norland continent's urgent situation had been resolved. It was a pity that Alex would not be able to escape from such a terrifying lightning strike. Mr. Alex. Dexter couldn't help but rush forward when he saw this scene. He raised his hand and took out his crystal ball, ready to help. Julian stopped him and said in a low voice, This lightning is very strange. It will attack people within a certain range indiscriminately. If you help now, you will only get burned." Irina also shook her head at him. Dexter looked anxious, but he knew that these two had an unusual relationship with Mr. Meg. There must be a reason why they didn't help Mr. Meg, and even stopped him. Amidst the lightning, the octopus monster let out a deafening roar and waved its tentacles crazily. Meg had also fallen into a frenzy. The feeling of his soul being torn apart was 1,000,000 times more painful than the cells in his body being crushed. That was a pain that couldn't be avoided by emptiness. It hit his soul directly. Meg felt his soul being cut into countless pieces. As his consciousness blurred, he seemed to see many memories of the past, including his birth, growth, some people he met, some things. Other than that, he also saw many terrifying scenes between heaven and earth. The huge eyeball in the depths of the sea, the headless corpse floating in the air, the dismembered corpse in the endless abyss. The pain and hallucinatory scenes in the depths of his soul pushed his mind to the brink of collapse. Why don't I just end it like this? Meg held the heavy sword with his trembling hand. Although it was a little difficult, as long as he controlled his strength properly, he should be able to cut his head and end all this pain. The new seal should be completed, and his mission would be completed. He lifted the heavy sword slowly and smashed it down towards his face. Right at this moment, the golden egg in the octopus monster's body was struck out by a bolt of lightning. Cracks appeared on it, and then it shattered completely. No pop-up window. Chapter 1795. Meg seemed to see the countdown to his life. The intense pain from the depths of his soul made him want to end everything as soon as possible. The heavy sword was already in front of him. As long as it landed, everything would be over. At this moment, a gentle white light suddenly fell on his body. As if a basin of ice water was poured over his head, Meg regained some clarity. Then, he saw the cute figure among the soul fragments. The lonely look on her face when she knelt by the bed and held his hand. The happy smile when she wore a new dress. The satisfied and happy smile when she ate the food he made for the first time. The falling heavy sword suddenly stopped and cut off a few strands of hair. "I can't die. This time, I can't die again." The heavy sword fell. Meg clenched his fists tightly and let out a low growl. The broken soul began to reassemble at this moment. The pain of this process was even more intense than being torn apart. Stop the restart program. The host is undergoing an unconventional evolution. 2 lines of small words flashed through Meg's mind. What Meg didn't notice was that a naked young girl was looking at him with confusion in the distance. Although she was in the middle of the lightning tribulation, the lightning didn't attack her. Instead, it went around her and formed a 2-meter-wide vacuum around her. The octopus monster was suffering the same pain and damage as Meg. It could not even take care of itself and was powerless to do anything to Meg. Meg did not know how long this process took. It seemed to be as long as a century. He saw his body, which had just recovered to level 10, being reconstructed in the thunder and lightning. It was no longer a baptism, but a rebirth after a complete collapse. The thunder and lightning engraved mysterious patterns on his bones and left mysterious marks on his muscles. He saw his soul being reconstructed after being torn apart. The 2 memories that were originally separated were completely merged into one soul, a stable and indestructible soul. Meg opened his eyes. The lightning surrounding his body suddenly dispersed and a vacuum appeared around him. This is? Meg lowered his head to look at his hand. His fingers were still fair and slender, and they didn't look much different from before. However, he knew very well just how terrifying and powerful this ordinary-looking hand was hiding. He had already experienced the power of level 10, and the power he possessed now was already above level 10. The originally sturdy Tian-Du sword had actually shrunk by a whole circle and became more delicate. However, it was still a heavy sword that was difficult for ordinary people to wield. A silver lightning symbol appeared on the hilt of the sword. When he held it in his hand, he felt as if he was connected to his soul. It was as if it had also been reborn in this lightning tribulation. Congratulations to the host for successfully ascending to godhood. The system's voice sounded. An unforgettable night had somehow turned into a good day. Apatheized? Meg frowned, somewhat puzzled. Level 10 is the upper limit of this world. Those who break through will naturally become gods. According to the ancient records, the host is the only one who has successfully ascended to godhood on the Norland continent in 100,000 years, the system answered. Meg fell into deep thought. It seemed like godhood was just a kind of breakthrough. However, he quickly thought of something. Then, have I completed your ultimate mission to become a god? Doesn't that mean you've completed the mission perfectly in advance? I am the god of cookery system. Do you know what the god of cookery system is? I'm here to help the host become a god with his culinary skills. But now, you've been struck by the lightning tribulation and become a god. This makes me very embarrassed, okay? How do you want me to explain to them? Am I not as fucking good as a lightning tribulation? Do I still have any dignity? It wasn't easy for me to rejoin the group. The system suddenly roared in exasperation. Meg raised his eyebrows. For a moment, he didn't know how to comfort the system. The conversation happened in the blink of an eye. Meg soon noticed the young girl not far away. It was a beautiful young girl. She was half a foot off the ground, floating there quietly and looking at him. Her palm-sized face was as exquisite as an angel's, and her long golden hair was let down gently. She had a pair of light green eyes that were bright and clear like the reflection of a green leaf in the morning dew. She wasn't wearing any clothes. The holy white light landed on her fair and transparent skin, but it made one unable to have any dirty and charming thoughts. The lightning also dispersed automatically around her body. The octopus monster was still roaring and struggling in the lightning tribulation. In this lightning tribulation that had yet to disperse, such a beautiful and strange young girl appeared. There must be something wrong when things are out of the ordinary. Meg held the long sword, and the sound of rushing thunder could be heard. In the next instant, he had already appeared in front of the young girl, and the long sword slashed towards the young girl's head with the sound of thunder. The young girl opened her mouth slightly and looked at Meg in disbelief. That innocent expression was like a delicate little white rabbit, making one feel pity for her. However, Meg's expression didn't waver at all. He knew how terrifying the power of the Great Old One was. Host, she saved you. The system's voice suddenly rang in Meg's mind. The long sword brushed past the young girl's body before it slashed down. The sword aura didn't slow down and cut off dozens of octopus tentacles. What? Meg looked at the young girl in front of him. Her expression was a little scared, but her eyes were still clear and clean. System, who is she? Why is she here? Why did she save me? According to the system's observation, she came from this Great Old One. Extreme good was born from extreme evil. She was originally suppressed, but seemed to have been struck out by the lightning tribulation. Previously, the host couldn't withstand the lightning tribulation and was preparing to commit suicide. She was the one who lent you a helping hand and helped you pass through the most dangerous stage. The system quickly explained. Meg recalled the most painful moment before. The sudden coolness allowed him to regain consciousness, and he survived the most difficult moment. So she was the one who saved him. Meg lowered his head and looked at the shattered golden eggshell on the ground. He suddenly thought of the golden egg he saw in the octopus monster's body during the previous lightning tribulation. It seemed like she came out of that egg. The power of the lightning had begun to dissipate, and the lightning that enveloped the sealed area also began to disappear. The octopus monster's aura had become much weaker, but it still managed to survive this terrifying lightning tribulation. The tentacles that were shattered by the lightning were recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Its crimson eyes stared at Meg and that young maiden again. The terrifying low roar sounded again, with obvious anxiety. Dozens of tentacles wrapped around the two of them, and the first target was obviously the young girl. The young girl was a little scared as she moved closer to Meg. Her clear eyes looked at Meg, as if she wanted to ask for his help. System, can I kill it now? Meg looked at the tentacles and asked with a frown. The host now has the ability to quickly cut it up. This is a very practical ability to handle ingredients. But with its recovery speed, before the host can kill it, it will tire itself to death. But as long as the host doesn't die from exhaustion, it won't be able to kill you. Chapter 1796. The system's answer was very artistic. In any case, he couldn't kill this great old one. But with the seal, as long as he didn't court death, it would be very difficult for it to kill him. If he forced himself to kill him, the most likely situation was that he would tire himself to death after cutting up the octopus tentacles on the ground. Gods, are they that weak? Meg's mood was a little complicated. He thought that after becoming a god, he could do whatever he wanted. He didn't expect that he couldn't even kill this great old one. Because the host's way of transcending the tribulation was too tricky, the so-called becoming a god now is only a realm above level 10. It's not a true god who can rule a world, and it can't even be considered to control a kind of law. Other than the increase in strength and the tenfold extension of lifespan, it doesn't give the host a divinity granted by the heavenly axiom. It can also be called a false god, the system answered. I really can't take the wrong path. Meg sighed, but he was still happy. After all, he only used 0.5 points of physical strength and successfully jumped 2 levels, and directly stepped into the ranks of gods. He didn't care whether he was a false god or not. His strength and lifespan were real. 10 times the lifespan. Wouldn't that be 1,000 years? He finally didn't have to worry about not being able to accompany Amy as she grew up. The host doesn't have to worry. With the system's considerate guidance, you can continue to spread delicious food in this world. One day, you will become the god of cooking recognized by the heavenly axiom, obtain a divinity, and become a true god. Please don't be arrogant. Please stay true to your heart. Please remember, your main mission is to become the god of cooking. The system was like a parent who was worried that his child would become arrogant after getting a high score in a mock exam. It was full of melancholy. I'm not worried at all. I'm very happy now. Although I can't kill everything, I'm still the first person in 100,000 years, right? Meg raised his eyebrows and smiled. As for the matter of the heavenly axiom sending me here, I won't argue with him. But I don't think it's that important whether the heavenly axiom recognizes me or not. Why do I have to be the god of cooking? Host, you're too arrogant. You. System, if I don't do missions in the future, will your mission fail? Will you be sent back to the factory to be rebuilt or thrown into the garbage dump? Host, you can't do this. Host? Dad, I was wrong. How can cooking be a mission? This was something that could bring a wonderful experience to both the cook and the consumer. As for me, I was my father's best assistant. I was in charge of helping my father cook more delicious food, bringing more delicious food to this world that was lacking in delicacies, allowing more ordinary creatures to grasp the ability to cook delicacies. This is such a great undertaking. I believe that every kind-hearted person would be willing to spare a little bit of spare time to do this trivial matter. What do you think? Father, the system said humbly. I think that's fine. Meg nodded in satisfaction. Looking at the girl in front of him, he asked, what should we do with her? From an ethical point of view, she belonged to the great old ones. However, in terms of good and evil, she belonged to the good and lawful faction. And from the attitude of the octopus monster, it definitely wouldn't allow her to exist in this world. Good and evil can't coexist. Since she came to this world, the great old ones will definitely kill her. If you don't take her away, she will definitely die here. Meg frowned. Taking her away wasn't a difficult thing. The most troublesome thing was how to explain her origin to the experts guarding outside the seal. Could it be that she was just born from the octopus monster? Or was this another personality of the octopus monster? No matter what, she couldn't avoid the fate of being beaten to death on the spot or being captured to be dissected for research. No matter what, this young girl was still his savior, and he couldn't do such an ungrateful thing. Moreover, even if she was to be dissected for research, he didn't think that those fellows outside would be more professional than the system. I'll take you away from here. Don't make any noise. Meg looked into the girl's eyes and said gently. The girl looked to be around 13 or 14 years old. Her delicate appearance made it easy for people to feel pity for her. She had an appearance and temperament that men couldn't resist. The girl nodded in confusion. It wasn't clear if she understood. Meg took out a cloak and wrapped it around the girl's body. He reached out and held her petite waist as he looked up. That octopus monster is still alive. The experts standing at the entrance of the cave exclaimed as they watched the lightning gradually dissipate from the sealed area. Although the octopus monster, which had countless tentacles broken by the lightning, looked miserable, it didn't turn into ashes in the terrifying lightning tribulation. After the lightning dissipated, its tentacles grew wildly again. Everyone was shocked by the octopus monster's terrifying ability to resist attacks and recover. Fortunately, the new seal had been built and wasn't destroyed by the lightning tribulation. They didn't have to worry about it rushing out for the time being. Alex, is he still alive? At the same time, everyone was very concerned about another problem. If Alex hadn't rushed into the array and attracted the lightning to strike the octopus monster, the new seal wouldn't have been built in time. However, Alex couldn't escape in time when the terrifying lightning struck. He suffered the lightning along with the octopus monster. The octopus monster, which had strong defense and recovery abilities, was already in such a miserable state. One could imagine how Alex, who had a human body, would end up. Although everyone had expected it, they still had some hope in their hearts. Irina staggered as she rushed to the seal. She bit her lip and stared at the ground that was almost scorched by the lightning. There were scorched black tentacles everywhere. Among the layers of tentacles, she didn't see Alex's figure. Crassus looked at Irina's back. He opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He just sighed. Everyone was silent. Putting aside the barriers and prejudice between the races, Alex's actions today had conquered all the powerhouses present. What's the situation down there? The tribulation clouds had already dispersed. The powerhouses above the catacombs were also shocked as they looked at the scorched ground within a 100-meter radius. There was even a 100-meter deep pit in the center of the ground due to the high temperature. Such terrifying lightning. If Alex really attracted it, he might not be able to protect himself, Lewis said with a serious expression. The new array is completed. It's just a pity that Alex. Douglas also sighed. All the powerhouses were silent. Is he dead? Sally, who was standing far away, was slightly stunned. She clenched her fists subconsciously. Haha, that guy is finally dead. Weston couldn't hide the excitement on his face. God knew how scared he was when he found out that Alex was still alive. Especially when he saw the terrifying lightning just now, he was really scared. Is he dead? Is he really dead? Although Josh's expression didn't change, his trembling hands couldn't hide the excitement in his heart. Boom. At that moment, a loud sound suddenly came from underground. At the same time, the ground started to shake violently. Excuse me, I'm going home to change my clothes. A figure dug a huge hole in the ground and came out. He spiraled into the sky with a cloud of dust and let out a long howl. A bolt of purple lightning flew over from afar and caught up with that figure as they flew into the distance. The powerhouses were left dumbfounded. They were speechless for a long time. Chapter 1797. In the underground cavern, all the powerhouses looked at the octopus monster that had hundreds of its tentacles cut off and was almost covered in sand, stones, and oats, as well as the huge hole at the top of the cavern. They were all dumbfounded. Alex didn't die. However, his clothes seemed to have been damaged by the lightning. Hence, he spiraled into the sky and escaped. He also cut off hundreds of the octopus monster's tentacles. Looking at the messy cavern and the octopus monster that was roaring and crashing into the seal barrier crazily, everyone was extremely shocked. However, when did the octopus monster's tentacles become so easy to cut off? The stones and dust automatically bounced away when they were 1 meter away from Irina's body. A smile finally appeared on her tense face, and at the same time, a hint of doubt appeared on her face. Heroes come from the young, Crassus lamented. He seems to have broken through again. Julian's eyes lit up as well. Outside the underground cavern, everyone looked at that purple lightning bolt disappearing into the sky with different expressions. Meanwhile, in the middle of the charred pit, there was a huge hole with a diameter of 5 meters that led straight to the ground. Alex is still alive. Michael was a little excited, and his heart was finally able to settle down. The powerhouses of Lantist were also overjoyed. All the powerhouses bowed and paid their respects to Alex in the direction that he left in. He was a hero who saved the world at the cost of his life. The eyes of the Roth Empire's knights glowed. The great general that they were familiar with seemed to have returned. The magic casters in the Magus Tower had mixed feelings. Alex was the Roth Empire's legend, after all. Although he had already left, they still felt honored. This aura, could he have really entered that legendary realm? Douglas murmured as he looked at the figure that had already disappeared into the sky. Legends are legends, after all. Us old fellows couldn't find a way to cross over after so many years. How could a young fellow in his early 30s enter so easily? Franklin shook his head and paused for a moment before he continued. However, since he was able to withstand such a terrifying lightning tribulation, his strength must have improved greatly during the 3 years he was missing. I'm afraid that we might not be able to defeat him. Anyway, I won't be able to withstand the lightning tribulation, Lewis muttered. Everyone's expression changed when they heard that. Although they were all at level 10, Franklin, Lewis, and the rest were the top powerhouses in the entire continent. Although there was no clear ranking, it was normal to say that they were no match for each other. However, they were clearly stating that they were no match for Alex. Didn't that mean that Alex had become the most powerful being on the Norland continent? How is this possible? Josh clenched his fists as he bit down on his lips so hard that blood trickled down. Alex didn't die, and the devil was sealed again. All of his plans were destroyed by Alex, and he lost everything. What was even more hateful was that Alex's strength had increased instead of decreasing. He was even stronger than before. This was not a good thing for him. How is he still alive? Weston's face paled instantly. After hearing what Franklin and the others said, he staggered 2 steps back and turned to leave. Weston, you tried to kill me back then. Since the danger is gone, I'll take your life today. An angry roar suddenly sounded in the sky. The purple lightning had returned. Before the person arrived, a black longsword was already flying over with lightning speed. Shit! Weston activated all the protective shields on his body instantly. At the same time, he gripped the black staff in his hand tightly and swung it at the flying sword that was right in front of him. As a 10th-tier demon, he had gathered almost all of his power on this staff. A blood-red shadow appeared on the staff. This was his natal weapon made from deep-sea cold iron. It was his greatest reliance on the Norland continent. He only needed to block Alex's attack. The other demons in Chaos City wouldn't just sit back and watch him die here. The black longsword was extremely fast. The blade seemed to be narrower than 3 years ago, and there were streaks of silver electric arcs on the blade. The void seemed to be cut open by it. The staff that was as thick as a thigh swung towards the black longsword. There seemed to be ghosts howling between the blood-red shadows. It was terrifying. Ding! There was a crisp sound, but the scene of a tit-for-tat didn't appear. The staff made from deep-sea cold iron was cut in half like tofu. No. Weston only had time to let out a terrified scream. The long sword had already pierced through all the protective magic shields on his body and nailed him to the ground. Smack! The half of the staff that had been cut in half fell to the ground. It stood beside Weston's head like a wordless tombstone. There was dead silence at the scene. The demons who were about to stop the attack stopped in their tracks. They looked at Weston, who was nailed to the ground and no longer breathing. Their eyelids twitched wildly. Michael's lips moved, but he didn't say anything in the end. All the powerhouses couldn't hide their shock. Weston's power was only average among the 10th-tier powerhouses. However, he was still a 10th-tier powerhouse who had been famous for a long time. Many people present might be able to defeat him or kill him at a certain price, but they didn't think they could kill him so easily. That sword seemed to be imbued with the power of lightning. Weston couldn't put up any effective resistance before he was killed. Everyone looked up at the figure sitting on the purple-striped griffin in the sky. Without a doubt, he had already entered the legendary realm and became the most powerful powerhouse on the Norland continent. What made everyone even more fearful was that Alex's longsword used to be unstoppable. Now, he was no longer limited by the length of the sword. His flying sword had the power of lightning and could easily kill magic casters who were casting spells from afar. Protect me. Josh's face turned pale instantly. He stumbled towards the two knights closest to him. All the magic casters and knights from the Roth Empire immediately closed up their formation and protected Josh in the center. They looked nervously at the figure in the sky and the black long sword that was as famous as its owner. There was an additional silver lightning mark on the Tiandu sword. It was less reserved and steady, and more wanton. Everyone knew that after today, the first place on the weapons rankings would be replaced. The Tiandu sword flew up and hovered at the height of a person, pointing directly at Josh. Alex, you can't kill me. I am the second prince of the Roth Empire. If you kill me, then you'll become the enemy of the entire world. Josh yelled with a trembling voice. He could feel the fear of death in that sharp blade. At this moment, it was extremely clear. It was as real as Weston's corpse. Although there were over 10 10th-tier powerhouses gathered around him, just like when they surrounded and killed Alex back then, Alex was no longer the one who needed to protect his child. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1798. Michael led the powerhouses from Chaos City towards Josh. If Josh were to die here today, the Norland continent would definitely descend into chaos before the peace conference. The powerhouses from the various races were also on their guard. As for the forest troll experts, they rushed toward Joshua. There were many suspicious points about that rainy night back then, but there were always rumors that Josh was involved. Today, Alex had killed Weston, and now he was pointing his sword at Josh. It seemed to prove everything. I won't kill you today. I'll let you live. Go back and tell Andre that if he chooses to embrace war, I will go to his palace and set off fireworks that are even more dazzling than this. Meg smiled coldly. As for your life, I will come and take it any time. As soon as he said that, the Tiandu sword flashed with lightning and pierced through the powerhouses protecting Josh. It slid past Josh's face. Blood splattered everywhere. One of Josh's ears flew up and then turned into ashes by the lightning. The Tiandu sword turned into a bolt of silver lightning and returned to Meg's hand. Ah! Josh screamed as he covered his ear. He hugged his head in fear and hid behind a knight as he shouted, "Save me! Save me!" Meg glanced at Josh and left under the fearful gazes of the powerhouses. The knights only came back to their senses now. Their backs were already drenched in sweat. If Mag had gone on a rampage to kill Josh, they wouldn't even have been able to stop him in his haste. Michael stopped in his tracks and heaved a sigh of relief as he watched the purple-striped griffin disappear into the sky. He was indeed Alex to be able to consider the big picture at a time like this. This prince is not going to be easy to be in the future, Douglas lamented as he looked at Josh, who was trembling and screaming. If he doesn't give him a quick death, he's going to kill him. Alex has become even more ruthless than before, Lewis said with a click of his tongue. Meg lifted a corner of his cloak so that the young lady in his arms could expose her face to the outside to breathe in the fresh air. Perhaps because they were flying too high, the young lady grabbed onto his waist nervously. However, her clear eyes were looking around curiously. Ozzy, go directly to the blue grassland. Meg patted Ozzy's back and said. Chaos City's crisis had been resolved, so it was time for him to bring Amy and the rest home. At the same time, he could also clear the identity of the young lady in his arms. As for Joshua, he was indeed able to kill him earlier. However, this fellow had caused the father and daughter to be in such a miserable state. Killing him with a single strike would be letting him off too easily. He let him go, but clearly told him that he would die and that no one could save him. There was a sword hanging above his head that could fall at any moment. This kind of fear was enough to destroy a person's will. What a wonderful method. I hope he doesn't go crazy before we make a move. The corners of Meg's mouth curled up without a hint of pity. The girl in his arms suddenly looked up at him. Meg also realized that after leaving the Thunderstorm Mountains, there seemed to be no need for him to continue hugging her and hiding her. He quickly placed her on the griffin's back. Although she was only wrapped in a large cloak, the young lady's pure and holy aura was not concealed at all. She looked at him calmly with her clear eyes. Hello, I am Meg. Thank you very much for saving me just now. How should I address you? Meg looked at the young lady and said gently, The young lady stared at him for a while and shook her head slightly without saying anything. You don't understand the common language? Meg was deep in thought. Although she looked to be 13 or 14 years old, she had actually just hatched from the eggshell. System, do you have the language system of the great old ones in your language learning machine? Meg asked in his heart. She is a mute girl and can't make a sound. Host, you don't have to waste your breath. The system replied quickly. Mute girl? Meg was a little surprised. However, since this young lady appeared, she really didn't make a sound. Be it fear or joy, she just waited quietly. This was a little troublesome. There was a language barrier, and at the same time, she couldn't speak. Moreover, she probably couldn't understand body language. It was basically impossible to communicate. Meg looked at the cloak wrapped around the young lady. The first thing he had to do now was to get her to change into suitable clothes. Otherwise, it would be difficult to explain to Amy and the others later. System, I want women's clothing, Meg said in his heart. Are you serious, host? The system was a little expectant. I want to customize a set of women's clothing for her. Meg rolled his eyes in his heart. After opening the women's clothing store, Meg quickly bought a set of white, light, and soft long down jacket for the young lady, as well as underwear and other underwear. It was paired with a pair of black and white snow boots. It was just right for this season. The system's customization was very fast. After 3 minutes, Meg took the package from behind him and took out the clothes inside to hand to the young lady. The young lady tilted her head and looked at Meg. She subconsciously reached out to take the clothes from Meg. The cloak on her body slipped off her fair shoulders. It was about to cross the line, but she didn't seem to care at all. Meg quickly reached out to help her pull the clothes back and fastened a pin on it. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. He was almost targeted by the mythical beast of harmony. However, he suddenly realized something very important. She had just been born and didn't even know the difference between men and women and the importance of wearing clothes, let alone wearing these complicated clothes accurately. Meg, of course, knew how to wear it. After all, he was a man who could undo a bra with one hand in a second. However, he couldn't do such an outrageous thing just because the young lady was young and ignorant. It was inappropriate. The young lady hugged a pile of clothes and looked at Meg with some confusion. System, make a sex education video suitable for deaf and mute children. Also, send a tutorial on how to wear clothes to the tablet. I'll pack it up and buy it. Mag paused for a while before adding, if she really can't make a sound, send her a copy of the Sign Language Initiation and Advancement course. This is a bit difficult, right? I think the mission is quite difficult too. Dad, don't worry. It'll be done soon. $99.99 doesn't want you. $59.99 doesn't want you. The cost price is only $19.99. The system's cheerful voice sounded. After a while, a 12.5-inch tablet appeared in his hand. The interface was very simple. There were no fancy pre-installed software. There were only 3 videos listed: sex education video for deaf and mute girls, understanding and wearing clothes, sign language tutorial, and advanced tutorial. Meg clicked on the understanding and wearing clothes video and then handed the tablet to the young lady. He pointed at her eyes and then pointed at the tablet interface, indicating for her to watch. The young lady took the tablet obediently. On the screen was a naked young lady who looked exactly like her. She picked up the clothes one by one and began to demonstrate in detail how to wear them. Chapter 1799. The girl watched the tutorial from the side while Meg started to do a detailed self-examination. Just now, he'd easily killed Weston, showing the insurmountable gap between a god and a level 10. As for taking Josh's ear from a dozen level 10 powerhouses, that was purely a show-off. If his accuracy had been slightly off, he might have taken his head. It wasn't that level 10 powerhouses were like noobs in front of him. It was just that they couldn't get used to his sudden flying speed, so they made mistakes in their defense and judgment. Controlling objects was an ability of spatial mages. Of course, there were also some non-spatial mages who could use similar spells. After Meg became a god, the most practical skill he'd obtained was sword manipulation. It was like a bug, a warrior who could fly, but how nice. The Tiandu sword seemed to have evolved with him during the lightning tribulation, gaining some lightning attributes. When it flew, it was even faster than Ozzy. This perfectly solved the awkward situation of a close combat knight facing a group of long-range mages but unable to fight in close combat. You know magic, I know flying swords. No matter how fast your magic is, it can't be faster than my flying swords. No wonder the gods were blocked. This is like cheating. It completely affects other players' gaming experience, Mag lamented in his heart. Other than sword manipulation, his body had also been greatly improved. It was a true rebirth. His strength and speed had been raised to the limit. He even felt that he could fight a giant dragon with his bare hands. As for sword techniques, Meg felt that everything was back to basics. He just had to do it. If he could kill with one sword, why bother with those fancy things? Of course, the main reason was that he didn't get it. Otherwise, he wouldn't mind looking cooler when he attacked. His lifespan wasn't something he could check himself. The system said it was 10 times. Based on the lifespan of a normal person, he could live for at least 1,000 years. Of course, this was the ideal situation. Theoretically, a turtle could live for 1,000 years. If it was raised well, it could send you away. But if it fell into your hands, it could only live for 3 days. A man would always encounter many accidents in his life. The longer he lived, the more accidents there would be. A chopper could even take his life. Thinking of this, Meg glanced at the girl who was staring at the tablet seriously and picking up clothes to compare them seriously. He felt as if he had dug a hole for himself again. It's great to become a god. Meg spread out his arms and lay back on Ozzy's back. He squinted his eyes and looked at the dazzling sun. A relaxed smile appeared on his face. After coming to this grotesque and variegated world, he carried too many things on his back. The deep-rooted hatred and the pressure brought about by his powerful enemies were like numerous mountains that pressed down on his body, causing him to practically be unable to breathe. At this moment, all the burdens and pressure could finally be completely removed. He had the ability to protect all the people he wanted to protect, and finally had the qualifications to enjoy real life. Life is great, Meg said with a smile. Just as Meg was about to take a nap, a rustling sound came from the girl's side. Meg turned his head and saw that she was taking off her cloak, revealing half of her shoulder. Wait a minute. Mag sat up with a shudder and quickly stopped her from continuing her actions. He opened the sex education video on the tablet for her as he asked Ozzy to lower their flying altitude. Meg found a clean little cave and brought the girl into it. He gestured for her to change her clothes there and then turned to leave the cave. About 10 minutes later, the girl, who had changed into new clothes, walked out of the cave. She walked cheerfully in front of Meg. She even mimicked the girl in the video and spun around in a circle. Her delicate and beautiful face was smiling like a flower. Do you like it? Meg asked with a smile. The girl seemed to be quite happy. Her playful look was very cute. However, he quickly realized that the girl did not understand his words and could not help but feel a little sorry for her. However, the girl was stunned for a moment and suddenly nodded. Then, she stretched out her right hand, crossed her index finger and thumb, and clumsily made a little heart with her fingers to Meg. In a world of ice and snow, the girl in a white down jacket clumsily tried to make a heart. It was like the warm sun in the cold winter, warming Meg's heart. Her eyes were as clear as morning dew, innocent and pure. Yes, she was after all a child who had just opened her eyes to the world. She was simple and pure. At that moment, Meg suddenly wanted to protect her until she could protect herself. System, if I didn't lead the lightning to the octopus monster, would she not have come to this world? Theoretically speaking, that is the case. In other words, she was born because of me. There is no problem with this logic. Then I am her father. You are really a genius at logic. But, is the octopus monster her mother? Shut up. Did I fuck a genius and have you? Is there a problem? No. No problem. Do as you wish. I don't mind having a sister. After Meg completed his logic, he looked at the girl with more affection and gentleness. He smiled and said, From today onwards, I am your father. I name you, Anne. The girl looked at Meg, not fully understanding. She opened her mouth slightly and mouthed Anne, but still did not make any sound.
Anne.
Meg repeated 3 times. The girl smiled and nodded to Meg in response. Let's go, and I will take you to meet your family and friends. Meg whistled. Aziz, who was hovering in the sky, swooped down and slowly landed at the entrance of the cave. Meg was originally worried that and would be frightened by the mighty Aziz. Unexpectedly, not only was she not afraid, she even took a step forward and reached out her little hand to Aziz. Aziz straightened its neck and squinted its eyes arrogantly at little Annie. However, in the next second, it put its head under Annie's hand and allowed her to stroke its head. It even closed its eyes comfortably and also smiled happily. She even put her face gently on Aziz's head as if she was communicating with it in a special way. Meg looked at this scene with a smile. It seemed like they could get along very well. The purple-striped griffin took off again and flew towards the north. Because of Alex, the new spell formation was successfully activated, and the octopus monster was sealed again. Chaos City's crisis was resolved. Chaos City was in charge of cleaning up the underground cavern and sealing it completely. This place would become a forbidden area on the Norland continent. The various races would send 10th-tier powerhouses to guard it to ensure that there would be no problems. The powerhouses from the various races had already left the Thunderstorm Mountains and returned to Chaos City. Meanwhile, the powerhouses from the Roth Empire had already escorted Josh back. Only 2 of them were left behind to handle the follow-up matters. Without a doubt, Alex reaching beyond the 10th tier would become the biggest variable on the Norland continent. No pop-up window. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.